Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step through a curtain of winter into a castle in the year 1381 while snow claws at the walls. Wind worries the shutters, and somewhere inside, a fire is doing its very best to pretend medieval insulation is a real thing. You are tired, half frozen, and looking for a place to sleep among spears, helmets, leather straps, and the comforting smell of smoke. Honestly, you probably won't survive this if you expect hotel standards, but you may do better if you keep your cloak tight and your complaints quiet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere, someone else is drifting off beneath a very different sky now. Dim the lights. You trudge forward through snow that has become less like weather and more like a personal argument with the universe. It gathers in the folds of your cloak, stings the skin around your eyes, and turns your breath into pale little ghosts that vanish almost as soon as they appear. The castle rises ahead, not graceful in this weather, not romantic in the easy way of tapestries and holiday cards, but blunt, heavy, and wonderfully stubborn. Its towers are dark against the storm, the walls rimmed with frost, the gatehouse lit by a few smoky flames that tremble behind horn-covered lanterns. Your boots sink. Pull free, sink again. The road has disappeared beneath blown snow, though somewhere under your feet lie packed earth. Old cart ruts, bits of straw, and probably at least one frozen puddle waiting to ruin your evening with impressive medieval commitment. You hear the wind rush along the curtain wall, then curl down into the outer yard with a low, hollow moan. It sounds almost like the castle itself is breathing in its sleep. The year is 1381, and England is not exactly having a peaceful little nap. That summer, the peasants' revolt shook London and several counties, driven by grievances over taxes, labour laws, and harsh lordship after the long shadow of the Black Death. That is the plain fact. The sort of thing a schoolbook says with tidy confidence, but here, in this storm, history feels less tidy. It feels like cold fingers, locked gates, wary guards, and people wondering whether news travelling from village to village is rumour, warning, or trouble coming up the road. You do not arrive as a knight, let us be reasonable. You are not clattering through the gate with polished spurs and a personal banner snapping in the blizzard. You are a small, chilled figure at the edge of a fortified household. Someone allowed inside because the weather has crossed from unpleasant into dangerous, and because even medieval people, despite everything, could sometimes be practical. A castle is a military site, yes, but it is also a working home, a storehouse, a workplace, a shelter, and a small community of people who would very much like the roof to stay attached until morning. The gate ahead is half open, just enough for bodies and beasts to squeeze through, not enough to look welcoming. A guard leans from the shadow, face wrapped in wool, beard glittering faintly with the frozen breath. His lantern gives him a golden chin and a black brow. He asks your business. You answer as simply as you can, because long explanations in freezing wind are how ordinary people become cautionary anecdotes. Behind him, a second man shifts a spear from one hand to the other. The spearhead catches the lantern light, then dulls again. Somewhere above, on the gatehouse wall, another guard coughs. The sound is small but human, and strangely comforting, in a place of stone, iron, and winter. A cough says someone else is cold too. The portcullis hangs above you like the teeth of a sleeping animal. It is iron-bound timber, heavy enough to make a point without needing to say much. Castles in the 14th century were not only symbols of lordly power, though they certainly enjoyed that role, with all the subtlety of a man wearing a crown at breakfast. They were practical defensive structures, with gatehouses often being among the strongest and most carefully controlled parts. That is the mainstream fact you feel in your bones as you pass beneath it. Entry is not casual, entry is permission. Your shoulders brush stone dampened by blown snow. The passage under the gatehouse smells of wet wool, horse, old smoke, and packed earth. A torch sputters in an iron bracket. Its flame bends sideways whenever the wind finds a gap, which seems often, because medieval buildings are generous with drafts in ways no modern heating bill could survive. The ceiling above is dark with soot. Drips fall somewhere unseen, slow and patient, each one making a tiny sound that almost vanishes beneath the storm. Then you step into the outer court. The open space is a blur of white and shadow. Low buildings huddle against the inner walls. A stable door bangs once before someone curses softly and pulls it shut. Not a dramatic curse. Do not get excited. Just the tired mutter of a person whose fingers are numb and whose evening has become a negotiation with hinges. Snow sweeps across the yard in pale sheets, spinning in the firelight from windows and doorways. For a moment you see everything at once, carts tilted under covers, barrels by a wall, a heap of chopped wood half buried, chickens long since hidden away, and footprints filling almost as quickly as they are made. A servant boy, bundled so thoroughly he looks like laundry with the legs, hurries past carrying a basket. He glances at you, then at the guard, then decides you are not his problem, which is a wise and timeless instinct. Somewhere to your left, a horse stamps and blows, shaking its mane with the offended dignity of an animal that knows perfectly well humans caused this situation. You are led across the yard toward the inner buildings, not to the great hall where the Lord's household and important guests would gather, but toward a more practical shelter, tonight. The armory has room near the hearth. This sounds alarming if your bedtime routine usually does not include sleeping beside edged weapons, but in a castle, space is not always divided according to modern comfort. Warmth matters, dryness matters, a place out of the wind matters, privacy, on the other hand, is a luxury, and one medieval society tends to treat as a charming theory. The snow crunches under your boots. You keep your head down. The guide ahead of you carries a lantern, and its glow makes the falling flakes look thick and slow, like ash from a cold fire. Your fingers ache inside your gloves. Your ears sting. The wet hem of your cloak knocks against your legs, heavy as guilt. Every breath tastes of iron, cold air and smoke. A quirky little tidbit, because history likes to tuck strange things into corners. Some medieval households used rushes and straw on floors not just for warmth and softness, but also to absorb spills, mud, and the general perfume of too many people living too closely together. Fresh herbs could be mixed in when available, partly for scent, partly because everyone involved had a nose and ambitions. Imagine calling that housekeeping. Imagine also being grateful for it. Tonight. You absolutely are. At the armory door, your guide lifts the latch. The wood is thick, swollen by damp, and it complains as it opens. Warm air slips out first, smoky and earthy, touching your face like a rough blanket, not warm by modern standards. Of course, nobody is inviting you into central heating, but after the yard, it feels almost luxurious, which tells us something about expectation, and possibly about how easily the human body can be bribed. Inside, firelight moves over racks and hooks and shelves, shapes emerge slowly, shields stacked along a wall, spear shafts leaning in bundles, padded garments hanging like tired bodies, helmets resting open-mouthed on a bench. A coil of rope lies beside a chest. Leather straps dangle from pegs. There are barrels, tool handles, a grindstone, folded cloth, and a smell made from smoke, oil, metal, damp wool, old wood, and the faint animal scent of leather. It is not unpleasant, it is dense, lived in, serious. The room seems to hold the day's labour even after the workers have gone. A fire burns in a low hearth at one end. The flames are modest, orange and blue at the base, feeding on split logs that hiss when damp pockets wake inside them. The chimney draws some smoke upward, but not all, because medieval smoke enjoys options. A grey veil hangs near the rafters. It softens the beams and makes the ironwork glimmer as though seen underwater. You step closer, palms out, heat prickles your skin. Your fingers hurt more now, which is rude but normal, the sting of returning feeling. Snow melts from your cloak and drops onto the floor. You hear it patter into straw. The sound is tiny, intimate, almost sleepy. Historians still argue whether castles in this period should be understood primarily as military machines, aristocratic residences, administrative centres, or symbols of social control standing here. You suspect the answer is yes. The armory around you is not just a weapons room, it is a reminder of power, a storage place for violence, a workplace for repair, and tonight, by the strange mercy of weather, a bedroom. A woman near the hearth looks up from mending a strap. She is older than the servant boy, younger than the walls, with sleeves rolled back and a face made calm by long practice. She gives you a look that measures your wet cloak, your shaking hands, and your likely usefulness. Then she points to a place along the wall where some spare sacking and a folded cloak have been laid near a chest. This, apparently, is your kingdom. You nod, because gratitude is easier than pride when your toes are numb. You cross the room carefully. The armory is not tidy in the modern museum sense. No one has arranged the weapons to help future visitors appreciate typology under flattering lights. Things are stored for use. A bundle of arrows rests near a bench, fletching wrapped against damp. A longbow hangs high, unstrung, its curve quiet in the shifting glow. There are knives for utility as much as fighting, because medieval tools often refuse neat categories. A mallet sits beside a broken buckle. A whetstone lies in a shallow dish. The whole room seems to say that survival depends less on glory and more on maintenance. Outside, the storm strikes the wall again, snow scratches at the shutter like fingernails, then falls away. The fire snaps softly. Someone moves in the passage beyond the door, footsteps fading, then gone. You loosen your cloak and feel the weight of the day slide from your shoulders in stages, not all at once. Medieval discomfort does not leave dramatically. It retreats by inches. Your back aches from walking. Your knees remember the road. Your cheeks burn from cold. Your stomach is beginning to notice that it has not been consulted recently and will probably lodge a formal complaint soon. But for now, there is firelight. You sit on the sacking, close enough to the hearth to feel warmth through your damp clothes, far enough not to smoke yourself like a winter ham. Around you, the armory settles into its nighttime personality in daylight. Perhaps it is busy with men checking bowstrings, servants fetching gear, smiths or armourers inspecting dents, guards arguing about whose turn it is to stand in rain. But now it is quieter. The weapons are at rest. The shields lean like sleeping faces. The helmets watch nothing. Your breathing slows. The blizzard still rages beyond the stone, but inside the flames make a small world. They turn iron red, then black. They paint the ceiling beams gold, then let them go. They find the edge of a blade and leave a thin line of light there, as delicate as moonlight on ice. You draw your cloak around you, press your chilled hands beneath your arms, and listen. Wind, fire, dripping snow, a murmur somewhere beyond the door. The castle is not silent, but its sounds are layered and low, like a body sleeping uneasily. You have arrived. You are inside the walls. You have not been given luxury, but you have been given shelter, which tonight feels very close to mercy. And as the storm folds itself around the towers, you begin to understand that sleeping in a castle armory in 1381 is not about romance. Not really. It is about stone between you and the weather, lane between you and the dark, and the strange comfort of being very small in a world that has somehow, for one winter night, made room for you. The guard behind you closes the armory door, and the storm becomes a muffled anima outside, still fierce, still prowling, but now separated from your face by oak, iron, stone, and a surprisingly optimistic latch. You do not sleep yet. Of course you do not. No one truly sleeps the instant they find themselves in a medieval weapons room during a blizzard, unless they are either very brave, very foolish, or already halfway frozen. You sit near the hearth with your cloak drawn tight, watching the room breathe in firelight, while the memory of the gatehouse stays with you like cold water in your boots. That gatehouse is more than an entrance. It is the castle's clenched jaw. You felt it when you passed beneath the portcullis, when the guards looked you over, when your name and reason for coming inside had to be spoken into smoky air before you were allowed forward. In the year 1381, gates matter, roads matter, news matters. People have been moving in restless numbers through parts of England, and every fortified household is listening for trouble, even when it pretends not to be. You hear a sound outside the armory, a tread in the passage, then a pause. Someone speaks low, another answers. The words do not carry clearly, but the tone does. Watchful, tired, practical. The castle is not panicking. Castles dislike appearing nervous. Still, there is an alertness in the night, the sort that settles into hinges, stairwells, and men's shoulders. Earlier, as you crossed beneath the gate arch, you saw how the passage narrowed around you. The stone walls were close enough to make you lower your head without being asked. Above, there may have been rooms where guards could rest, store equipment, or watch the road. Many medieval gatehouses were built with defensive features like portcullises, murder holes, arrow loops, and heavy doors, because the entrance was often the most vulnerable part of a castle. That is the ordinary historical fact, but ordinary facts become less ordinary when you imagine them from underneath. While snow pours behind you and someone above decides whether you are harmless, the guard at the gate had not been cruel, that is worth noticing. He was simply doing the work of the threshold. His wool cap was pulled down low, a leather strap crossed his chest. Snow clung to one shoulder where the wind had pushed it under the arch. He held his spear without drama, because weapons used every day are rarely held like stage props. His eyes moved from your face to your hands, from your hands to your bundle, then back again. You remember how the lantern shook in his grip. Not fear, perhaps, just cold. The little flame inside its frame trembled as though it too had opinions about being awake after dusk. Lanterns in this period might use horn panels instead of glass, since thin scraped horn could protect a flame while allowing some light through. A quirky detail, yes, but also a useful one. Imagine carrying bare flame through a snowy yard full of straw. Wood, wool, and tired people. That is not atmosphere. That is a future insurance claim. If insurance had been invented in any helpful form, you sit now with that memory, feeling warmth creep into your knees. The woman at the hearth has returned to her strap repair. She draws an awl through leather with calm pressure, then threads it, pulls, tightens, and repeats. The rhythm is almost hypnotic. A small iron pot near the fire exhales steam from something too thin to be called stew with confidence, but too warm to criticize. Your stomach notices and becomes deeply political. Beyond the walls, the world is hidden. The road that brought you here has vanished. The fields are gone beneath snow. The village. If you could see it from a tower by daylight, it would be nothing now but scattered roofs, faint smoke, and maybe a church tower fading into white. But people are awake out there too, in cottages where wind pushes through wattle and daub, in barns where animals shift and stamp, in huts where a banked fire is guarded like treasure. The castle feels strong but not separate. It depends on the villages around it for food, labour, rents, fuel and gossip, that most renewable medieval resource. The uprising of 1381 began after years of pressure. Poll taxes imposed during the reign of the young Richard II helped ignite anger, especially after the Black Death had changed labour conditions by killing so many people that workers could sometimes demand better wages. The government tried to hold wages down through laws like the Statute of Labourers. Such tidy phrases hide a world of hunger, resentment, bargaining, and punishment. You do not need a university lecture in the Armory tonight. You can feel the tension in simpler terms. Some people have too little, some people command too much, and everyone knows the road can carry more than merchants. Historians still argue whether the revolt was mainly a sudden tax rebellion, a broader social revolution, a series of local uprisings with shared language, or something more complicated that refuses to sit neatly in a labelled box. Medieval people, inconveniently for future textbooks, did not always organise their lives according to our chapter headings, here in the castle. The argument is not academic. It lives in the way guards speak more softly at night, in the way a gate is barred a little sooner, in the way strangers are questioned even when their eyelashes are frosted and their teeth are trying to chatter out a hymn. You hear the wind press against the door again. The latch rattles once. The woman by the hearth glances up, not startled, just checking. Then she looks back down. The castle has hundreds of tiny noises, and the people who live here know which ones matter. A loose shutter has one voice, a rat has another. A man trying to be quiet has another still. You, being new, cannot tell the difference. So naturally your imagination volunteers for extra duties. The guard who escorted you in told the woman only a few words. A traveller caught in the storm, room by the fire, gone at morning, weather willing. Weather willing is doing a lot of work there. Medieval travel depends on weather, daylight, animals, road conditions, local hospitality, and whether anyone with authority decides your presence is inconvenient. You glance toward the door and quietly decide that being inconvenient in a castle at night is not a hobby you intend to pursue. A boy enters carrying 2 more logs. Thin wrists red from cold, he ducks his head, sets them beside the hearth, and tries not to stare at you. He fails gently. You're new, and new things are entertainment, especially when the alternative is hauling fuel in a blizzard. 1 log rolls, bumps against a shield, and makes a hollow wooden note. The boy freezes as if he has offended the entire military history of Europe. The woman gives him a look. He retrieves it quickly. You almost smile. The shield it touched is painted but worn, its colours dim in the smoky light. It may bear a lord's device, or perhaps an older pattern kept long after fashion moved on. Heraldry, those coloured symbols on shields and banners, served practical identification as well as family pride, especially in a world where armour could make faces less useful than usual. But inside the armory, under dust and soot, the symbols seem less like grand identity and more like household equipment. Even glory needs storage. The passage outside grows quieter. Somewhere in the castle, a bell rings faintly, not a great ceremonial peal, but a practical note marking time or duty. The sound reaches you softened by walls, as if travelling through wool. The woman pauses, listening, then resumes her stitching. The boy slips out again. Cold air enters with him and curls round your ankles before the door shuts. You think again of the gatehouse after dusk, its upper chamber with guards hunched near the brazier, its stairs slick with tracked snow, its bolts, bars, and chains, its narrow view of the road, where nothing can be seen clearly, but everything must be watched. A castle gate at night is a place of judgment. Friends come through, enemies try to. Messengers pound on it, beggars plead at it. Villagers bring warnings to it. Travellers like you stand before it trying to look harmless while carrying the entire suspicious mystery of being unknown. And now, inside, you begin to understand how the castle sorts the world. Outside and inside, known and unknown, warm and frozen, permitted and refused. These are not abstract divisions. They are felt in your wet socks, in the guard's narrowed eyes, in the scrape of the closing door. The fire shifts. A log collapses inward, sending a fountain of sparks up the chimney. For one bright second, every blade edge in the room catches light, and the armory becomes a constellation of iron. Then the glow settles again, low and steady. You draw your knees closer beneath your cloak. Your place on the floor is not soft, but it is yours for the night. The straw smells faintly sweet beneath the stronger sense of smoke and metal. Somewhere above, footsteps cross a floor, pause, then move away. The wind continues its long complaint against the stones. You are inside the gate now. You have crossed from danger into shelter, though shelter in 1381 is never quite the same as safety. The guards keep watch. The storm keeps pushing. The castle listens, and you, small and warming by the armory fire, listen with it. The listening becomes easier once your body stops arguing quite so loudly with the cold. At first, all you can think about is your fingers, your toes, the damp at your hem, the ache behind your knees, but slowly, as the fire presses its rough warmth into the room, the armory begins to open around you, not literally, thank goodness. A room full of weapons should not start opening in unexpected ways at night. It simply becomes readable. Shadows settle into shapes. Shapes become objects. Objects begin telling quiet stories. You sit with your back near the chest, the wood hard behind your shoulders, and let your eyes travel along the wall. Spears lean together in a tall bundle, their shafts pale where hands have rubbed them smooth. Some are straight and well kept, others bow slightly, as if remembering bad weather or careless storage. Their iron heads are dark, not shining like storybook steel, but rubbed with oil and use. Near them rest shorter polearms with hooks and blades, tools of war that look uncomfortably related to farming implements, which, in a way, many are. Human beings have always been inventive about turning useful shapes into dangerous ones. A cheerful bedtime thought, naturally. The armory is warmer near the hearth, but the room does not heat evenly. Cold remains in the corners, pooled around barrels and beneath benches. When the wind finds some small crack in the wall or shutter, a thin thread of air slips through, touches your neck, and reminds you that comfort here is negotiated, not guaranteed. Firelight flickers over stacked shields, some are round, some longer. Some made of layered wood covered with leather or painted cloth. Their surfaces show dents, scratches, repairs, and patches where paint has flaked away. Nothing here looks decorative for long. Even symbols must work for a living. A mainstream fact rests quietly in the room with you by the late 14th century. Many castles still held stores of arms and armour, but their roles varied widely. Some remained serious military strongholds. Others functioned more as aristocratic residences, administrative hubs, or local centres of authority. This armory belongs to that mixed world. It is not a museum of war. It is a cupboard for power, a workshop for repair, and tonight, rather inconveniently for everyone's sense of order, your bedroom. The woman by the fire finishes stitching the leather strap and tests it with both hands. She pulls, frowns, pulls again, then gives the smallest approving nod. Medieval quality control, you notice, is mostly strong fingers and suspicion. She sets the strap beside a padded garment hanging from a peg. The garment is quilted, stained at the edges, and thick enough to make you think of comfort until you remember its purpose. Padding worn beneath mail or plate helps spread the weight of armour and softened blows. It also absorbed sweat, smoke, rain, and the general biography of its owner. You would not bury your face in it unless sleep had truly defeated your standards. A helmet sits on the bench beside her, open and shadowed. Its shape is simple, practical, slightly battered around the rim. Another rests farther along, with a face opening that seems almost curious. In the firelight, they look less like objects and more like patient creatures waiting for heads. Sleeping giants. Perhaps, though not yet. That thought belongs later. When the night grows deeper and your imagination becomes more confident. For now, this room is busy even in stillness. Grindstone near the wall has a shallow basin beneath it. There are scraps of cloth for wiping oil from blades. A little dish holds something dark and greasy, likely fat or oil used to protect metal from damp. Rust is a quiet enemy in any armory, and winter is its helpful assistant. Snow tracked in on boots, wreath fogging in cold air, damp wool, leaking roofs. All of it conspires against iron. The people of this castle fight weather even when no human enemy appears. Honestly, the blizzard may be the most persistent besieger of the night, and it does not even have to pay wages. A quirky tidbit hides near the practical work of weapon care. Some medieval recipes for cleaning, polishing, or treating metal could include materials that sound strange to modern ears, such as vinegar, ashes, oil, chalk, or even urine in certain craft processes because of its ammonia content after aging. Yes, the past does enjoy occasionally walking into the room and ruining the candlelit mood. But before you judge, remember that people used what worked, what was available, and what did not require ordering from an invisible internet wizard. You shift your weight on the sacking. It rustles softly. The floor beneath is packed hard, covered in straw and rushes that have been pushed around by many feet. Here and there, the straw is darker where melted snow has soaked in. A few herbs may be mixed in, bruised underfoot, giving off a faint green scent whenever someone crosses the room, not enough to erase smoke and metal, but enough to soften them. Medieval freshness is not modern freshness. It is less lemon sparkle, more, please let the floor not smell like last week. The boy returns again, this time with a small wooden bowl. He gives it to the woman, who glances at you and gestures toward it. Inside is warm broth with a few softened grains or bits of vegetable drifting in it. Humble, thin, and miraculous. You take it carefully. Heat seeps through the wood into your palms. The first sip is salty, smoky, and plain, but your body receives it with deep gratitude. Luxury, you are learning, is not full fixed. Sometimes it is a bowl that is not frozen. The boy crouches briefly near the hearth, warming his hands. His sleeves are patched. His hair is flattened by a cap. He watches the fire with the solemn concentration of someone who knows exactly how precious it is. In a castle household, children and youths could serve in many humble roles, learning work by doing it, being scolded for doing it badly, and occasionally being invisible until needed. You wonder if he sleeps in a loft, in a corner, near the stables, or wherever his tired body is allowed to drop. Historians still argue whether daily life in castles should be imagined as more disciplined and hierarchical, or more improvised and crowded than older romantic pictures suggest. The truth probably shifts from castle to castle, season to season, household to household, to night. The Armory gives its own answer. It is organised, but not neat, controlled, but not silent, hierarchical, but full of small negotiations. You are here because weather has temporarily outranked status. The storm outside has rearranged the sleeping plan, and no heraldic banner has been able to stop it. Near your feet, a barrel gives off the smell of pitch or oil. Another may hold arrow shafts or spare parts wrapped against damp. A chest sits locked. Iron bands black in the firelight. What is inside? Better weapons records. Spare fittings. Something boring but important, which is usually how history gets you. You imagine the key hanging from someone's belt, perhaps the armourer's, perhaps the senior servant's. Perhaps a man currently asleep and trusting that no half-frozen guest will become suddenly ambitious beside the spears. The armory's ceiling beams are thick and dark, with cobwebs tucked into corners where smoke has turned them grey. Hooks hang from above, some empty, some holding cords or straps. Every now and then, a drop of melted snow falls from your cloak onto the straw. Softer now than before, your wet wool is beginning to steam faintly. You smell yourself, which is unfortunate, but not surprising. In this room, personal dignity has joined the general inventory. The fire makes everything intimate. It brings the weapons close, not as battlefield objects, but as household things. The spear is not charging, it is leaning. The helmet is not terrifying, it is dented and waiting. The shield is not a symbol of glory, it is scratched, slightly damp, and in the way. Even violence, stored for later, becomes domestic after dark. The woman rises and hangs the repaired strap from a peg. She stretches her fingers, then covers the thin broth pot with a wooden lid. The boy slips away again. The room settles another layer lower. You cradle the bowl until the last of its warmth leaves it, then place it beside you. Outside, the storm presses on. Inside, firelight trembles across iron, leather, wood, and straw. You begin to feel how the armory holds the castle's harder dreams. Its fear of attack, its pride, its duty, its expensive equipment, its practical clutter. And for this one night, it also holds your breathing, your damp cloak, your grateful hands, and the first soft heaviness of sleep waiting at the edges of your eyes. You set the empty bowl aside and begin the delicate business of turning a corner of a castle armory into a bedchamber, which is a sentence no sensible person expects to think at the end of a long winter road. Yet here you are, blinking into firelight, considering the sleeping qualities of sacking, spare cloaks, straw, and a chest that may or may not contain something sharp enough to alter your dreams. The woman by the hearth notices you looking at the floor with the cautious expression of someone trying to rank discomforts. She points again to the space near the wall, then gestures to a folded cloak and a rolled piece of coarse fabric. Not a mattress, let us not become unrealistic, but it is dry. Mostly, and lifted a little from the worst of the damp straw, in a 14th century castle. That is not nothing. It might even count as thoughtful hospitality, provided you do not ask too many questions about who used the cloak last. You kneel and test the place with one hand. The floor beneath the straw is hard, packed by years of boots, dragging barrels, drop tools, and the ordinary pressure of castle life. The sacking scratches your palm, the cloak smells of wool, smoke, rain, and faintly of horse. Because every fabric in the Middle Ages seems determined to have at least a minor relationship with livestock. Still, it is warmer than stone. You spread it carefully, smoothing the worst folds, then pull your own cloak around yourself while keeping the damp outer edge away from your legs. Medieval people usually slept in ways shaped by rank, wealth, and available space. The noble household might have curtained beds, feather mattresses, linen sheets, and servants moving quietly at the edges of sleep. Lower status workers often made do with straw pallets, benches, shared beds, cloaks, or simple floor spaces near warmth. You're very much in the second category tonight. No embroidered canopy, no perfumed linen, no pillow presented by a smiling attendant. Just you, the armory wall, and the gentle threat of a spear rack nearby. Cozy, in the sort of way that builds character without asking permission. You shift a barrel a few inches with your foot, then stop at once when it gives a low wooden groan. It is heavier than expected. Perhaps it holds spare fittings, arrowheads, oil, or something equally useful and unsympathetic. A shield leans against the wall near your shoulder. You nudge it slightly so that it will not tilt forward in the night and clap you awake like a very rude dinner guest. The shield scrapes the wall softly. Dust drifts down. You freeze, waiting for someone to object. No one does. Above you, A beam creaks. The storm answers with a push against the roof. Snow whispers along the shutters in dry bursts, then rattles against a crack as if trying to get inside and review the accommodations. You tuck the rolled cloth under your head. It is too firm and too low, but after hours in the cold, your standards have become beautifully humble. Your body begins making quiet agreements. The knees agree to bend, the shoulders agree to lower, the jaw, still tight from cold, finally loosens. Close to the hearth, the woman banks part of the fire, rearranging embers with an iron tool. She is not putting it out. No one wants that. She is persuading it to last. Fire management is one of the great unnoticed arts of the pre-modern world. A household that lets its fire die carelessly in winter has chosen inconvenience at best, danger at worst, and a morning spent coaxing sparks from neighbours or striking flame again with cold hands. Your modern self, spoiled by switches and buttons, watches with appropriate reverence. There is a small belief, odd but tender, that some people placed items such as knives, charms, or bits of protective writing near beds or cradles to ward off unseen dangers. Practical objects and spiritual defences often shared the same room without embarrassment. Tonight, sleeping beside actual weapons, you decide the armory may be overqualified in this department. If bad dreams come wandering through, they will have to step around polearms first. Still, weapons do not make you entirely safe, they are only things, and sleeping near things is different from knowing how to use them. You glance at a short blade on a bench, then look away, best not to develop heroic fantasies. Heroic fantasies are how tired travellers become local anecdotes. Besides, the castle has guards for a reason, and you are currently more suited to shivering than combat. A few other sleepers settle beyond the reach of the brightest firelight. A man who may be a servant or guard removes his boots with a sigh that contains an entire winter. He places them near the wall, stuffs something inside them, perhaps dry straw, perhaps cloth, then lies down wrapped in a cloak. Another figure curls near a stack of padded gear, using a folded tunic as a pillow. No one undresses fully. That would be ridiculous in this cold. Clothing is bedding. Bedding is armour against the night. Modesty, warmth, and readiness all blur together under wool. Researchers continue to question how much privacy ordinary people expected when they slept in medieval households. Some evidence suggests that shared sleeping spaces were common and not necessarily considered shameful, especially among servants, travellers, and workers. Yet rank mattered deeply, and access to a private bed could signal comfort, authority, and separation from the noise of others. Your little space along the armory wall answers the question softly. Privacy is not absent. Exactly, it is measured in turned backs, lowered voices, and the small courtesy of not staring while someone tries to disappear into a cloak. You lie down at last. The first sensation is hardness, the second is relief. Your body, traitorous and grateful, accepts the floor almost immediately. Straw crackles beneath the sacking. The rolled cloth presses into your ear. Your damp outer cloak cools at the edges, while the inner layers gather heat slowly. You curl slightly, not from fear but from instinct. Smaller shapes keep warmer. Outside, the wind spends itself against stone. Inside, every sleeper becomes a little bundle of breath. From this angle, the armory changes. You see the underside of the bench, the dark legs of the chest, the lower parts of shields, the hanging ends of leather straps. The fire is no longer a full blaze, but a low, pulsing glow. Its light crawls along the floor and catches bits of straw, making them shine like tiny gold threads before they fade again. Helmet on the bench now looks enormous, its hollow opening aimed somewhere above you, as if it too has chosen to sleep sitting up. The smell of the room deepens near the floor. Straw, damp wool, soot, old leather, and the mineral chill of stone mingle together. Somewhere in the straw, something small moves. You do not investigate. There are moments when knowledge is not an improvement. It may be a mouse, it may be nothing. It may be one of those tiny medieval realities that prefers to remain unnamed. You pull the cloak closer and decide generosity toward unseen creatures is an excellent policy when you're outnumbered by shadows. The man near the padded gear begins to snore, gently at first, then with more confidence. The sound rises, catches, stops, and resumes. It is oddly reassuring. A snore is not elegant, but it is proof that someone nearby has trusted the room enough to surrender. Another sleeper mutters once and turns over. Leather creaks. A log shifts in the hearth. The woman, still awake, sits with her back to the wall and wraps her own shawl tighter. You think of beds you have known. Clean sheets, soft pillows, quiet rooms, doors that lock for privacy rather than defense. They seem far away, almost imaginary. Here, comfort is assembled from scraps, a dry patch, a shared fire, a wall against the wind, a stranger's gesture, a bowl of broth, a folded cloak. And because the storm still rages outside, these scraps become precious. Your eyelids grow heavy, then lift again. The room wavers. Firelight turns spear shafts into dark reeds. The shields become low moons along the wall. The chest at your back feels less like storage and more like a boundary. Marking the small area where your night will unfold, you breathe in smoke. You breathe out slowly. Snow strikes the shutter in a soft hiss. The castle settles deeper around you. The gatehouse watches. The servants move less often. The guards keep their rounds. And you, tucked between shield, chest, straw, and fireglow, begin to understand that a sleeping place does not have to be gentle to be welcome. It only has to hold you until morning. The promise of sleep comes close, then pauses politely, because your stomach has decided that broth was merely a suggestion, not a meal. It turns over inside you with quiet medieval disappointment. You lie still, hoping it will be reasonable. It is not. Hunger in a cold room has a particular voice. It is not loud exactly, but it is persistent. Like a monk copying the same complaint into every margin. You are not the only one thinking of food. Near the hearth, someone lifts the lid from the small pot again and scrapes its bottom with a wooden spoon. The sound is soft and dry across the room. The snoring man snorts himself awake, blinks, and asks something in a rough whisper. The woman answers with one word. He sighs, which seems to mean either no more food or no more patience, possibly both. Then, as if summoned by every empty belly in the armory, the door opens. Cold air enters first, sharp and gleeful, slipping beneath cloaks and around ankles before anyone can object. Behind it comes the servant boy, carrying a covered wooden trencher and a small jug. His cheeks are red, his eyes bright from the wind, and his whole body gives the impression of a candle being hurried from one room to another before it blows out. He kicks the door shut with his heel, not gracefully, but effectively, a very underrated skill. The woman rises and takes the trencher from him. She sets it on a bench near the fire, lifts the cloth, and the room changes at once. Not grandly, no golden roasted swan arrives wearing a crown, and no musician appears to celebrate your emotional relationship with carbohydrates. But warm bread, a little cheese, onions softened in fat, and a few strips of salted meat release their smell into the armory, and everyone nearby becomes quietly more alive. Your stomach gives a hopeful little leap. You pretend not to notice because dignity is all you have left, and even that is damp. The woman tears a piece of bread and passes it to the snoring man, who is now very awake. Another piece goes to the boy. She cuts a smaller portion and hands it to you without ceremony. You take it carefully, almost reverently. The bread is coarse, dark, and dense, with a crust that resists your teeth, just enough to remind you this is not bakery softness. It tastes of grain, smoke, and heat. It is wonderful. In a castle household, supper is not only nourishment, it is a map of rank. The lord and higher status guests eat in the hall, often with better bread, More meat, more ceremony, and a clearer view of who sits where. Servants, guards, labourers, and lesser dependents eat according to role. Timing, and leftovers from above. Food descends through the household like warmth from a fire, stronger near the centre, thinner at the edges. Tonight, you're definitely at the edge, and yet the edge has bread. You're grateful. The cheese is firm and sharp with a little salt crunching at the surface. You eat slowly to make it last, though your body suggests a less dignified plan. A strip of meat follows, tough from salting and smoking, but rich enough to fill your mouth with the memory of summer animals and autumn slaughter. The onion is soft, sweet, and greasy against the bread. You had not expected onion to feel luxurious. History is educational in many ways. The boy crouches by the fire and eats his share in fast. Careful bites, he watches the door, then the woman, then the food. Always alert to whether more might appear. It probably will not. Still, hope is free, at least until taxed. And this is 1381, so let us not give anyone ideas. That year, poll taxes had become a fierce source of anger in England, especially because they fell heavily on ordinary people and were collected with methods remembered as harsh and intrusive. The great rising that followed did not begin in castles, but castles and manor houses belonged to the world it challenged. In every bite of bread, in every rule about who eats first, you sense the same structure that fills the country outside lordship. Labour, obligation, resentment, habit, necessity. Supper is never just supper when society itself is sitting at the table, even if you are actually on the floor near a barrel. There is an old kitchen oddity you may appreciate while chewing in the dark medieval cooks sometimes use thick slices of stale bread as trenchers, edible plates that soaked up sauces and juices among wealthier diners. The used trencher might be given afterward to the poor or to animals, depending on custom and household generosity. A plate you can eat sounds charming until you remember it may also be someone else's soggy leftovers. The past is very good at offering a pleasant idea and then immediately making it complicated. The food from the hall carries faint traces of that larger world. Perhaps the best dishes were served earlier pottage thick with peas, fish if the day required it, roasted meat for the high table, sauces sharpened with vinegar, or spices if the household could afford them. Spices were not used simply to cover spoiled meat, despite the old myth that refuses to die like a Herat cockroach. They were expensive, desirable, and displayed status. Even a little pepper could whisper wealth more elegantly than a shouted boast. Your portion whispers no such thing. It mostly says, "Please survive the night. That is enough." The woman pours a little ale from the jug into a wooden cup and passes it around. When it reaches you, you drink. It is small ale, weak and nourishing, safer in many settings than questionable water, though water was certainly drunk too. The ale tastes sour, grainy, and faintly smoky. It spreads warmth through your chest, less from alcohol than from comfort. A cup shared in a cold room has its own quiet ceremony. There is no conversation for a while. Eating takes attention. Teeth work through crust. Fingers brush crumbs from wool. Someone licks salt from a thumb. The fire crackles and the storm presses at the shutters as if annoyed not to be invited. The room smells warmer now, full of bread, onion, wool, smoke, and bodies beginning to relax. A question still troubles historians and food scholars: how far did castle meals reflect genuine abundance? And how often were they performances of status built atop strict rationing for everyone below the high table? The answer depends on household, season, wealth, region, and crisis. In a storm, in winter, with roads closing under snow. Even a well-stocked castle must think carefully about stores: flour, salt meat, dried peas, ale, firewood, candle wax, oats for horses. All of these matter. A castle is only as confident as its supplies. The boy gathers crumbs from the cloth with 2 damp fingers and eats them. The woman pretends not to see, which may be kindness, fatigue, or policy. The snoring man, now fed, leans back and closes his eyes again. His face softens. Food does that. It lowers the guard at the edges of the face for a moment. He's not a watchman or servant or whatever place the household has given him. He is simply a tired person with bread in his stomach and fire on his boots. You hold your remaining crust and make yourself take smaller bites. It grows harder as it cools, but you chew with patience. Hunger fades from sharpness into a dull, pleasant weight. Your body, previously a committee of complaints, begins to agree on sleep as a sensible agenda item. From somewhere beyond the armory, faint sounds drift from the hall, a low laugh, a bench moved, a door closing. Perhaps the higher table is finished. Perhaps servants are clearing boards, collecting cups, scraping trenchers, banking fires, counting what remains. The castle does not end its day all at once. It folds itself down by rank and duty. One group eats, then another. One fire dies. Neither is fed. One person sleeps while another watches the gate. You think of the hands behind your portion, the miller who ground the grain, the baker or cook who worked before dawn, the dairy woman who pressed the cheese, the butcher, the brewer, the servant who carried the trencher through snow, the woman who divided it without fuss. Food is the most ordinary chain of dependence. And in 1381, chains of dependence are exactly what many people have begun to question. But here, in this room, the politics quiet for a while, not vanish, just quiet. Bread does not solve injustice. Ale does not erase fear. Still, warmth and food can soften the night enough for breathing to deepen. You lick the last grain from your finger, tuck your hands beneath your cloak, and feel sleep move closer than before. The door stays shut. The fire lowers around you. The armory settles into the gentle after-supper silence of people who have not had enough, but have had something, and sometimes. Something is the difference between a hard night and an impossible one. The last crumbs vanish, and the armory becomes quieter in the way rooms do after food. When jaws stop working and thoughts grow heavier, the boy lifts the cloth from the trencher, folds it with surprising care, and tucks the empty jug under one arm. He moves toward the door as though the storm outside is only another chore waiting to be finished. You watch him pause, listen, then slip into the passage. Cold enters for a breath and leaves with him. You are nearly asleep, but the castle will not quite allow it. Not yet. A fortress at night is not dead. It is not even especially still. It simply changes hands. The visible life of the hall, the lord, the formal meal, the voices near the high table, all of that fades behind doors and curtains. Then the hidden life begins to show itself, footsteps in corridors, pails carried in both hands, ash swept from hearths, rushes stirred, locks checked, animals fed, cups rinsed, boots dried, fires coaxed, doors barred, and every task done by someone whose name will probably never trouble a chronicle. The armory door opens again after a little while, and this time 2 women enter carrying a bundle of damp cloths and a small basket of tools. One is broad-shouldered, with a cap tied tight under her chin. The other is younger and narrow-faced, moving with the quick caution of someone still learning which objects are allowed to be touched and which are best left to people with louder voices. They speak quietly to the woman by the hearth, then begin sorting the cloths near the heat. You stay where you are, wrapped in your cloak, eyes half closed, pretending not to stare. It is a useful skill in shared sleeping spaces. The cloths steam faintly as they warm. One woman shakes out a rag stiffened with cold, then lays it over a bench. Another checks a leather glove, rubs at a seam, and holds it to the firelight. Their hands are red, cracked, and capable. The castle may be built of stone, but it runs on hands like these. In a medieval aristocratic household, servants were not a single kind of person. There were cooks, laundresses, grooms, porters, pages, clerks, dairy workers, brewers, chamber servants, messengers, guards, and many more, all arranged by status, skill, gender, age, and closeness to authority. Some received wages, some were bound by obligation. Some were young people placed to learn service and manners. The household was an employer, a school, a hierarchy, and sometimes a cage, depending on where you stood and who controlled the doors. A small detail from household life feels almost too human. Servants in large houses often knew the rhythms and secrets of the place better than its grandest visitors. They knew which stair creaked, which lord drank too much, which chest stuck in damp weather, which dog would steal from a platter, and which passage stayed warm longest after the kitchen fires burned low. Power may sit at the high table, but practical knowledge carries the candles. The younger woman kneels near the hearth and wrings melted snow from the hem of a cloth into a wooden bowl. The water runs grey. She grimaces, then laughs silently, shoulders bouncing once. The older woman gives her a warning glance, but not a harsh one. Sound travels at night. Laughter is allowed. Perhaps, but only in small portions. Medieval quiet has class rules too. Beyond the armory, you hear a bucket set down, then a soft scrape. Someone is sweeping, not the grand sweeping of a clean modern floor, but the pushing aside of ash, mud, straw, crumbs, and the day's debris. Floors in castle service spaces must be managed constantly, especially in winter when every boot brings in wet grit, dung from yards, bits of hay, and snow that melts into cold little insults. Fresh rushes may be added, old ones carried out, hearth ash collected. Even dirt has a schedule. The women work without hurry, but they do not waste motion. One folds a dry cloth, one checks a row of straps. The woman from the hearth, the one who first pointed you to your sleeping place, takes a small knife and trims a frayed leather end. The blade shines briefly, then disappears in her hand. Her movements have the calm of repetition. She has done this before in better weather and worse moods. You begin to notice how much of the castle's strength depends on people who are almost invisible. The wall keeps out the storm. Yes, but someone hauled the wood that feeds the fire. The gate bars the entrance. Yes, but someone oils the hinges. The lord may own the armour, but someone wipes the damp from it. The great hall may impress visitors, but someone scrubs the boards after the impressive visitors have dropped grease. Crumbs, and their opinions all over the place. There is a long-running argument among scholars about how we should read service in medieval households as a path to security and advancement for some, as exploitation for many, or as a web of dependence that could be both protective and oppressive at once. You can feel that tension here. The servants have shelter, food, place, and belonging, but also obedience, labour, limited privacy, and little control over nights like this. They are inside the castle walls, but not at the centre of comfort. They are the ones keeping comfort alive for others. A man enters with a small bundle of split kindling. He is older, his beard white at the edges, his shoulders bent not by weakness, but by decades of being useful. Snow dusts his cap. He deposits the kindling beside the hearth and squats to warm his palms. One of the women mutters something about the yard. He answers with a sound that could mean terrible, impassable, or I refuse to discuss weather as if it has manners. The others nod, everyone understands. The storm has made their labour heavier. A normal night has enough tasks. A blizzard adds wet clothing, nervous animals, blocked paths, hungry fires, delayed messengers, uncertain roads, and the constant possibility that something will break under snow. Roofs must be watched, doors must be cleared, water must be fetched before it freezes hard. Horses must be checked because a valuable horse getting sick is not simply sad. It is expensive in a way that makes stewards develop headaches. The older man turns one boot toward the fire. Steam rises. He notices you awake and gives a small nod. Not welcoming exactly, but not unfriendly. You nod back from your cloak cocoon. There is no need for words. You're a temporary piece of the night's clutter, and everyone has accepted it. The younger woman carries the grey water toward the door. But before she leaves, she stops at a shelf and takes down a little twist of something dried. Herbs, perhaps. She crumbles a few leaves near the hearth, where the heat wakes their scent. It is faint, bitter, and green. Maybe rosemary. Maybe something more local. Maybe simply whatever was gathered and kept for making smoke less miserable. The air shifts, not clean but fresher. Compared to damp wool and metal, it feels almost luxurious. One odd household habit worth remembering is that fragrant plants were sometimes scattered or burned to sweeten indoor spaces, especially where people, animals, smoke, and food smells mingled freely. It was not only decoration, it was survival for the nose. You breathe in, carefully, grateful for whatever plant has volunteered to stand between you and the full aroma of winter humanity. The man with the kindling leaves, the younger woman follows. The older woman stays a while longer, checking the bench, the pot, the cloths, the hearth. She is not restless, she is responsible. That is different. Responsibility moves through a room, touching things lightly, making sure the night will not unravel when everyone else closes their eyes. Your own eyes drift shut, then open again when the door thuds softly. For a moment, you think of all the people whose labour will be missing from official stories. Chronicles may name kings, rebels, bishops, battles, councils, punishments, charters and taxes. They may not name the boy who carried bread, the woman who mended straps, the old man who brought kindling, the girl who poured grey water into snow. Yet without them, the castle would not last a week, let alone a winter. The hearth settles lower. The last woman sits down again, wraps her shawl close and rests her head against the wall. Her face loosens in the firelight, not asleep yet, but near it, around her. The armory holds the evidence of many hands repaired leather, stacked shields, wiped blades, folded cloth, swept straw, banked coals. You sink deeper into your cloak. The storm remains outside, but the servants have drawn an invisible line against it, task by task, breath by breath. You understand now that the castle does not sleep because it is strong. It sleeps because someone, somewhere, stays awake long enough to make sleep possible. The armory grows still enough that you can hear small things again. Straw settling under someone's shoulder, a thread of wind worrying at the shutter, the faint tick of cooling iron near the hearth. The sleepers around you have become shapes beneath wool, and the servants who kept the room alive have retreated into other shadows. Yet the weapons remain awake in their own way. Not moving, not speaking, but holding the attention of the room like stern old relatives who disapprove of poor posture. You lie on your side and look at the spear rack nearest the wall. The shafts rise together, tall and pale, their iron points dark against the smoky rafters. In daylight, perhaps, they would seem ordinary to those who handle them. At night, in firelight, they feel almost like a thicket. You imagine a man reaching for one in haste, fingers closing around smooth ash wood, the cold iron head lifting into lamplight. Then you let the image fade. There is no battle here, not tonight. The spears are at rest, and rest is the only kind of weaponry you currently approve of. A spear is simple enough to understand, which may be one reason it stayed useful for so long. Wood, iron, reach. A person with a spear can keep danger at a distance, at least in theory. The castle likely stores several kinds of pole weapons because medieval fighting depended on context-mounted men, foot soldiers, guards at gates, defenders on walls, local levies with mixed training and equipment. By the late 14th century, English warfare was shaped not only by knights and noble retinues, but also by archers, men-at-arms, and paid or summoned forces whose equipment could vary widely. History likes a shining knight, but logistics prefers a rack of usable tools. Near the spears, The longbow hangs high, unstrung, its curved body quiet in the gloom. It is taller than you expected. Not a toy, not a delicate hunting bow, but a serious length of wood. The English longbow had become famous in the wars with France during the 14th century, especially after victories where massed archers played decisive roles. You do not need a battlefield's speech to appreciate it. You only need to imagine the strength required to draw one properly, again and again, until shoulders burned and fingers hardened. Your own fingers, still thawing from the storm, are not applying for the position. Below the bow, a bundle of arrows rests wrapped against damp. Their fletching is guarded, because feathers suffer from wet weather as dramatically as anyone's mood. The points are not all the same. Some seem narrow, some broader, some made for different purposes. The firelight barely touches them, but enough to show that each arrow is a small piece of labour shaft selected and shaped, feathers trimmed and tied, head forged or fitted. The whole thing stored carefully so that it may fly once and perhaps never return. Medieval warfare, when you look closely, is not only violence, it is carpentry, feathers, glue, cord, heat, patience, and accounts. There was a practice, odd but practical, of waxing bowstrings and protecting them from damp, because moisture could weaken performance at exactly the wrong moment. Archers might carry spare strings under hats or inside clothing to keep them dry. So if you ever imagined medieval soldiers as careless people simply charging about in mud, please take a moment to appreciate the man quietly keeping string near his body warmth like a tiny sleeping pet. The past is rarely tidy, but it's often ingenious. A rack of shorter blades rests farther along the bench. Some are knives used for everyday work as much as defence. Others are larger, heavy enough to be weapons without needing to announce themselves. One has a worn grip where leather wrapping has darkened from years of hands. You see nicks near the edge. A whetstone lies close by, pale and smooth from use. Someone has been maintaining these. Because a neglected edge is not romantic. It is just a problem waiting to embarrass you. Metal carries memory in dents and scratches, but not the kind of memory that speaks plainly. This is where uncertainty enters the room. Specialists still disagree over how frequently certain weapons kept in castle stores were actually used in combat, rather than retained for display. Obligation, emergency defence, or the ordinary readiness expected of a lord's household. A sword on a rack might have seen a campaign, a training yard, a ceremony, or nothing worse than damp storage and rough handling. The object does not confess, it only lies there, shining when the fire reaches it. You shift under your cloak, careful not to rustle too loudly. The shield near your shoulder gives off a dry smell of painted leather. Its rim is damaged in one place and repaired with a patch. You like that. It makes the shield feel less like an emblem and more like a thing that has been forgiven. Medieval people repaired constantly. Cloth, shoes, harness, tools, pots, roofs, barrels, weapons. The modern habit of discarding broken things would look, to many of them, like madness performed at greater pence. Across the room, something drips into a bowl, slow, patient. You count 3 drops, then forget to count the 4th. The storm has softened into a steady pressure around the castle. No longer a fury in every sound, but a deep cold presence in that muffled quiet. The weapons seem calmer too. They are not the flashing symbols of songs. They are stored labour, stored fear, stored authority. They wait because people have arranged society so that some rooms must always contain waiting violence. You wonder who is allowed to touch what. Surely not everyone may take a sword from the bench. A guard, perhaps, an armourer, a trusted servant under orders, a nobleman's retainer. The boy with the logs would likely be scolded into next week if he began examining blades with curiosity. Access is rank made physical. The lock chest matters because the key matters. The key matters because trust has boundaries. Even in a room crowded with arms, power lives in permission. Your eyes travel to a polearm with a hooked blade. In firelight, It looks almost agricultural, which is unsettling because farms and battlefields are cousins, more often than polite history likes to admit. Many weapons developed from or resembled tools used for cutting, chopping, thrusting, or pulling. A billhook, for instance, had roots in woodland and agricultural work, and related forms could become battlefield weapons in the hands of infantry. It makes sense. People adapt what they know. A village does not need fences to become dangerous. It needs pressure, anger, and tools. That thought brings you back to 1381, to rumours at the gate, to taxes and labour laws, to villagers and townspeople carrying grievances along the roads. Not every rebel would have carried a proper weapon from a lordly armory. Some would have brought bows, staffs, knives, bills, axes, hammers, whatever the world had already placed in their hands. The difference between tool and weapon may be intention, and intention can change quickly when hunger and injustice are given enough years to ripen. You breathe slowly and let the sharper thoughts dull again. This is bedtime, after all, even if bedtime has chosen questionable decor. The fire makes a soft cave of light near the hearth. The longbow casts a curve on the wall like a dark moon. The spearheads are dim now, less threatening, more like black leaves at the top of winter reeds. The knives lie flat and quiet. The whetstone sleeps beside them. Nothing asks anything of you. A sleeper turns over, and a boot heel thumps the floor. No one wakes fully. The woman by the hearth murmurs in her sleep, then settles. You realise how strange it is that such dangerous things can become background. Humans can get used to almost anything, apparently, including sleeping next to enough sharpened iron to make a modern safety inspector evaporate. Yet the room does not feel cruel, it feels serious. The weapons are not hungry, they are tools held within a human order. And tonight that order has paused. No hands lift them, no commands pass from lord to guard, no alarm bell rings. Snow buries the road, and the armory is allowed to be only a room smoky, cold at the edges, warm near the hearth, crowded with sleeping bodies and resting objects. Your eyelids lower again. You see the spear rack blur, then return. You think of the hands that made these weapons, the hands that polished them, the hands that may one day carry them outside the gate. You think of all the ordinary care behind extraordinary danger. Oil on iron, wax on string, feathers kept dry, leather mended before it snaps, quiet work before noise. The fire folds inward. The storm leans against the stones. You tuck your chin into your cloak and let the weapons fade into the room's larger darkness. Not gone, not forgotten, just resting with everything else until morning decides what sort of day it will be. The weapons fade into a gentler darkness, and the armour begins to take their place in your imagination. It stands and hangs around the room like a gathering of absent people, each piece shaped by a body that is not here. Helmets on benches, mail folded over pegs, padded garments slumped against chests, gauntlets lying palm up as if asking question on one another. What's to answer of? The firelight moves across them slowly, touching metal, withdrawing, returning again. From the floor, you see armour differently, not as a shining suit from a polished museum hall, arranged heroically with 1 foot forward, but as weight, as smell, as straps, as damp fabric, as a problem of storage. The mail shirt nearest you hangs from a wooden peg, dark and heavy, its tiny linked rings making a faint whisper whenever the draught stirs it. It does not gleam, it glowers softly. If you had to lift it now, half asleep and sore, you suspect you would lose the argument. Mail armour was made from thousands of interlinked metal rings, and although it had been used in Europe for centuries, before 1381 it remained useful in the 14th century. Often worn with padded garments and, increasingly, with plates protecting vulnerable areas. Armour in this period was not one simple thing replacing another overnight. It was a layered, changing collection of protections, textile padding, mail, iron or steel plates, helmets, gloves, and fittings, all shaped by cost, fashion, battlefield experience, and what a person could afford or was issued. A padded jack or gambeson hangs near the hearth, drying slowly. Its quilted channels are stained darker at the armpits and collar. You can almost feel the body heat it once trapped, the sweat it drank, the rain it held, the discomfort it made bearable because the alternative was worse. It looks soft, but in the way a working dog is soft only partly. Padding was essential because metal alone does not make a person invulnerable. It must be held, cushioned, tied, and borne. Without padding, a blow through armour could still bruise, break, or stun, so beneath every grand silhouette is cloth doing quiet, unglamorous work. You look at the helmet on the bench, the one with the dark opening. Its rim is worn where hands have lifted it again and again. A small dent marks one side. Perhaps it came from practice, perhaps from transport, perhaps from being dropped by someone who then pretended very hard that nothing had happened. Armour invites heroic speculation, but daily life offers plenty of less poetic explanations. Not every dent is a battlefield memory. Some are just gravity, that ancient enemy of dignity. There is a curious old practice surrounding armour, kete, that makes the room feel more domestic than martial. Mail could be cleaned by tumbling it with sand, bran, or other abrasive materials to scour away rust and grime. Imagine that the frightening shirt of iron being shaken or rolled about like laundry with an attitude problem. Even war gear eventually becomes housekeeping somewhere. Someone has probably cursed this mail not because it saved a life, but because it was filthy, damp, and refusing to dry properly. A pair of gauntlets lies open beside a leather strap. They are not delicate gloves, though the fingers show careful construction. You imagine sliding your hand inside one, feeling cold metal over the knuckles, leather inside stiff with old sweat. The hand would become both protected and clumsier. That is the bargain. Armour gives and takes. It shields the body while changing how the body moves. Hears, feels, breathes. It makes a person safer and less free at the same time, which is a tidy little metaphor the Middle Ages did not ask for, but seems to have provided anyway. Specialists continue to weigh how armour affected mobility in practice, especially because surviving pieces, artistic images, written accounts, and modern reconstructions do not always tell the same story. Popular imagination often pictures armoured people as nearly helpless once burdened, but skilled wearers could move with surprising agility when the armour fitted well and the weight was distributed properly. Still, no one sensible would describe it as effortless. The body pays for protection, it pays in heat, fatigue, restricted vision, and the constant irritation of straps. You become aware of your own body under the cloak. Your shoulders ache from walking. Your ankles are stiff. Your neck dislikes the rolled cloth pretending to be a pillow. And yet, compared with the imagined weight of mail and plate, your discomfort feels almost modest. You're merely sleeping beside the castle's iron skins. Others have had to wear them into mud, rain, shouting, confusion, and the awful speed of events once fear becomes public. The armour also smells, not strongly from one piece, but collectively. Metal oil, damp leather, old wool, sweat trapped in padding. Smoke from fires like this one. It is a human smell. Even when no human stands inside the gear. Armour is intimate in a way weapons are not. A spear belongs to the hand, a sword belongs to the hand and hip, but armour belongs to the whole body, all. It knows the bend of an elbow, the width of a chest, the heat beneath an arm, the place where a strap bites after hours of movement. You imagine the person who wore the padded garment, perhaps a guard of the household, perhaps a retainer who followed his lord in campaigns, perhaps a man who has spent more time waiting than fighting. Because readiness contains long stretches of boredom. He might complain about the weight, the smell, the cost of repairs, the cold of metal in winter and the heat of it in summer. Heroic art rarely includes the complaint that your helmet strap is rubbing your chin raw. This is a shame. because it would make the saints and warriors in painted scenes seem much more relatable. On a shelf above, a small row of buckles and rivets rests in a dish. These little pieces matter more than they look. A failed buckle can loosen protection at the worst moment. A broken strap can turn fine armour into an expensive nuisance. The armoury is full of tiny dependencies. Rings depend on rivets, plates depend on leather depends on stitching depends on hands depend on food, warmth and sleep. Everything circles back to ordinary needs. Outside, the blizzard throws snow against the wall in a long, soft hiss. Inside, the helmets keep their hollow patience. Firelight settles briefly inside one of them and gives it the look of a face remembering something. You blink, and it is only metal again. A sleeper near the padded gear shifts and pulls his cloak higher. The fabric drags over straw. Someone sighs. The woman by the hearth breathes evenly now, her chin lowered. Around her, the armour hangs in rows, empty and waiting, like a second household that does not need bread but does demand constant care. You think again of rank. Good armour is expensive. It speaks of wealth, service, lordship, war and obligation. A nobleman might own pieces made to fit his body, while lower status fighters might use simpler or older protections. Whatever was provided, inherited, bought second-hand, repaired repeatedly, or taken from stores. Not all armour is equal, and not all bodies receive equal protection. Even fear is stratified, even survival has a budget. The fire drops lower, and the metal loses its edges. The mail shirt becomes a dark curtain. The helmets become rounded shadows. The gauntlets become sleeping hands. You let them soften. You no longer imagine the bodies that wore them in sharp detail. They become impressions, shoulders beneath weight, breath inside helmets, fingers flexing in leather, someone lifting a visor for cold air, someone laughing tiredly while a companion helps unfasten fastened straps. The armory is full of help like that. Armour is difficult to manage alone. One person ties, another adjusts. Someone points out a loose strap, someone holds a helmet, someone checks the fit at the shoulder. Beneath the image of solitary warriors lies a more tender truth people often needed other people simply to get dressed for danger. Your eyes grow heavy again. The armour around you no longer feels watchful. It feels abandoned to rest, like boots drying by a door. The storm outside can rage as it likes. The castle's iron bodies are empty tonight. Their wearers, wherever they sleep, have stepped out of them and returned to being flesh, tired and cold and hungry like everyone else. You settle deeper into the cloak. Firelight fades along the mail, ring by ring, until the whole thing becomes one dark mass. The helmets lose their faces. The padded garments sag into silence, and as sleep comes nearer, you are comforted by the thought that even the hardest things in the castle must be taken off eventually, placed on a peg, dried by a hearth, and left to dream without bodies until morning. The thought of empty armour carries you towards sleep, but the blizzard does not approve of being ignored. It rises again beyond the walls, not suddenly, but with a long gathering pressure, like a crowd taking a breath before speaking. The shutters tremble somewhere high above. Snow slides from a roof in a heavy, muffled fall. A sleeper snorts, rolls over, and pulls his cloak tighter. The castle answers the storm with stone, timber, iron, and of the quiet stubbornness of people who have already survived many winters and do not intend to be impressed by this one. You lie still and listen as the weather explores the building. Wind moves along the outer wall, searching for gaps. It whistles through some narrow crack near the roof, then vanishes, then returns in a lower voice. The sound changes depending on what it touches, a thin cry at the shutter, a dull push against the door, a hollow groan in the chimney, a soft hiss where snow sweeps across the yard. The storm is not one sound, it is an entire household of sounds, badly behaved and refusing to sleep. The armory's walls are thick, but they are not magical. Stone holds cold beautifully. It keeps out blades, arrows, and wandering strangers, but it also stores winter like a memory. The wall beside you breathes chill through your layers if you press your palm to it. The cold reaches back at once, clean and mineral, as if the whole castle has become a cliff. You decide not to place your palm there for long. Curiosity is admirable. Frostbite is less charming. Castles were built from local materials whenever possible, and many English castles combined stone walls with timber floors, roofs, doors, hoardings, outbuildings, and internal partitions. Their defensive strength depended on design, maintenance, money, and constant repair. A wall is not simply built and then admired forever. Mortar crumbles, roofs leak, wooden fittings rot, iron rusts. Weather wages its own quiet siege across decades. Tonight, the blizzard is only making visible a fight that never truly stops. From somewhere beyond the armory comes a thud, followed by quick steps. Someone calls softly. Another voice answers from farther away. No alarm follows, so the room relaxes again. Perhaps a shutter came loose. Perhaps snow pushed against a door. Perhaps the servant dropped something heavy and is now quietly inventing a version of events in which the fault belongs to the weather. A useful tradition, that. The fire bends suddenly as wind presses down the chimney. Smoke rolls outward, grey and bitter, then lifts again. You close your eyes against the sting. A few sleepers cough. The woman near the hearth wakes, sits up, and watches the smoke until the draught steadies. Chimneys in medieval buildings could be temperamental, especially with shifting wind. Earlier halls often used central hearths with smoke escaping through roof openings or louvers, but by the later Middle Ages, fireplaces and chimneys were increasingly important in higher status buildings. Important. Yes. Perfect. Absolutely not. Smoke remains a houseguest with poor boundaries. You smell it now, sharp and resinous, layered with damp wool and the faint sourness of human sleep. The smoke scratches your throat, then thins. The fire resumes its low work. Outside, the wind throws another handful of snow at the shutter. The sound is like sand brushed across parchment. One small, almost comic detail from winter building life. People sometimes stuffed gaps with cloth, moss, straw, or whatever could be spared to reduce drafts. Not elegant, but effective enough to matter. A castle may look mighty from a distance, with towers against the sky. Yet up close someone is always jamming something into a crack and hoping it stays there. Grandeur, as usual, requires maintenance by cold fingers. You wonder about the roofs beneath the storm. Timber rafters carry the weight of snow, tiles or thatch or wooden shingles depending on the building, all of it creaking softly under wind. The main towers and stone ranges may endure, but outbuildings, sheds, lean-tos, and covered walks are more vulnerable. A castle is not one single block of strength, it's a cluster of strong and weak places. The wall may stand firm while a stable roof leaks onto a miserable horse. The gate may be barred while a kitchen shutter flaps like a panicked bird. The evidence leaves room for disagreement over how comfortable castle interiors were in winter. Some historians emphasize their cold, smoky, drafty conditions, especially in service spaces, while others point out that wealthier households used hangings, screens, rushes, fires, enclosed chambers, and layered clothing to create pockets of warmth. From your place on the floor, both views seem true. The castle is freezing, the castle is shelter. You're uncomfortable, you're deeply grateful. History, inconsiderately, refuses to be simple. A gust hits the wall so hard that the shutters rattle in their frame. One of the spear shafts taps against another. A tiny clack. Then stillness. You hold your breath without meaning to. No one else rises, so you release it. The sleepers here know the difference between danger and weather showing off. You're still learning. The storm also changes time, without stars, moon, or road sounds, without carts passing or animals moving in the yard. The night becomes thick and uncertain. There may be hours until dawn, or there may be half the world. The fire has become your clock. A log collapses, embers settle, someone feeds it. The glow rises, fades, rises again. Time is measured in warmth. You imagine the castle from outside, though you cannot see it. Snow clings to the windward walls, gathers on ledges, fills the ditch, softens the sharp lines of battlements, and hides the road leading to the gate. The towers that seemed so severe when you arrived now stand wrapped in white, their military posture slightly embarrassed by the weather. It is difficult to look fearsome while wearing a snowcap. Even a fortress can look tucked in. Yet snow also muffles danger. Footsteps vanish. Tracks are covered. Distances blur. A watchman on the wall sees less and hears less, except for the wind. He must guard a world reduced to lantern glow and instinct. Snow can protect a castle by making travel difficult, but it can also hide movement. A storm is both shield and veil. No wonder the guards keep listening. You hear one now outside the armory. Boots passing along stone, slow and measured. The steps pause near the door, then continue. Perhaps he's checking latches. Perhaps he's moving between posts. Perhaps he's been awake too long and is staying upright through habit. His presence steadies the room. The castle has people at its edges, holding the line between the sleeping and the storm. Your own warmth has gathered under the cloak at last. Not full warmth, not comfort in any modern sense, but a small pocket of heat made by wool, breath, and stubborn biology. You keep your knees bent. Your feet have stopped aching and now feel heavy. Your hands, tucked near your chest, are no longer stiff. This is how sleep comes in a medieval winter, not as a soft invitation, but as a gradual treaty with discomfort. The wall beside you gives another faint creak, not the stone itself, but timber somewhere within or above. The room adjusts. Buildings are never motionless. Wood swells and shrinks. Mortar settles. Wind presses. Snow loads the roof. Fire heats one side of a beam while cold grips the other. The castle is a body, and tonight you hear its joints. A distant door bangs once, then secured. Voices murmur, then quiet returns, thicker than before. The firelight has sunk low enough that the armour becomes formless again. The longbow is only a curve. The shields are only roundness and shadow. The spearheads vanish into the rafters. You listen to the blizzard spend itself against stone. It sounds endless, but you know it is not. All storms end, even the ones that feel ancient while they are happening. Snow will lie deep in the morning. The yard will be difficult. Someone will curse the drifts. Someone will laugh. Someone will begin clearing a path. The castle will show its bruises, a broken latch, a leak, a missing tile, a drift against the stable door, and life will go on, because that's what people do after weather fails to finish them. For now, you're held between the storm and the fire. Cold presses from one side, heat pulses from the other. The wall remains firm, the roof remains above you, the shutters, dramatic but loyal, stay shut as you breathe in smoke, wool and winter stone, then breathe out slowly into the dark. The blizzard keeps speaking, but its voice grows softer inside your thoughts. It becomes part of the room's rhythm, like snoring, like embers, like the faint drip of thawing snow. The castle does not defeat the storm, it endures it, and you, tucked beside its armory wall, learn the older art of endurance too, quiet, curled, and waiting for the night to pass. The passing footsteps fade, and for a while you follow them only in your mind. They move beyond the armory, along a corridor where the wall is cold enough to numb a careless palm, past a shuttered opening where snow presses in pale drifts, then down a stair polished by generations of boots. You're not truly walking with the watch. Of course, your body remains tucked beneath woolen smoke, safely unheroic on the floor, but the sounds invite you outward, and the night, being long, has room for imagination. Another set of steps comes soon after, slower this time. A pause at the armory door. A hand tests the latch from outside. The iron lifts slightly, drops, and holds. No one enters. The guard moves on. Such a small gesture. Yet it says everything about the castle after dark. Every door is a question. Every latch is an answer. Every sleeping person depends on someone awake enough to ask. You listen as the steps continue towards the yard. A draught moves through the gap under the door, bringing the scent of snow and cold stone somewhere nearby. A lantern hook scrapes against a wall. The watch is making its round. In many castles, the night watch was a practical necessity, not a dramatic ceremony. Guards checked gates, doors, fires, walls, and vulnerable places, especially in troubled weather or uneasy political times. They were not always armoured like illustrations in a tournament manuscript. Often they were cold men in cloaks, carrying spears, staffs, lanterns, or whatever their duty required, trying to stay awake while the rest of the household surrendered to fatigue. There is a certain honesty in that image. Civilization, at 3 a.m, is mostly someone with sore feet checking whether a door is still shut. The woman by the hearth stirs, opens her eyes, and listens. When no alarm follows, she closes them again. She has heard these rounds many times. The snoring man sleeps through them with impressive trust. You do not. Every sound still feels new, and the castle's darkness has become a map you cannot read. You picture the guard in the passage outside. His lantern might be made with thin horn panels, clouded and amber, so the light falls in a soft square rather than a sharp beam. It swings from his hand, brightening one patch of wall, then another. The stones sweat slightly where warmer indoor air meets winter cold. His boots leave wet marks that darken the floor. He mutters as he walks. Not prayers, perhaps, not quite complaints, but the low private language of someone staying awake by keeping words moving. Some households used watchwords or passwords, especially in military contexts or periods of tension, to help identify friend from stranger after dark. You imagine one guard murmuring a phrase at the stair, another answering from the shadow, nothing grand, no theatrical challenge ringing under the vault, just a rough whisper, a reply, and the quiet relief that the shape ahead belongs to someone expected. In a blizzard, when faces are muffled and lanterns distort everything, recognition becomes a fragile craft. The wind presses hard against the outer door somewhere down the corridor. A bar thumps as if testing its own strength. The guard stops. You hear it, or think you do. Perhaps he leans his shoulder against the timber and checks the crossbar with a gloved hand. Perhaps he bends to see where the snow has blown beneath. Perhaps he curses the gap with tired affection. The castle survives not because every part is perfect, but because imperfect parts are noticed before they fail. A peculiar custom from medieval guarding life sits at the edge of your thoughts in some places. Watchmen or town guards used bells, horns, or shouted calls to mark the hours and reassure sleeping people that the watch was awake. The sound could be comforting or annoying, depending on whether you had to rise before dawn. Tonight, no loud call comes through the armory. The storm would swallow it anyway, but the idea is sweet in a practical way. A noise in the dark saying, "Sleep, I have not slept." The steps climb now, or you imagine them climbing. Stone stairs in castles are narrow, uneven, and often spiral, with cold gripping each tread. A right-handed defender descending from above might have an advantage in some stair designs, although this neat explanation does not apply as simply to every castle as people like to claim. Medieval architecture has suffered many confident tour guide myths. The truth, as usual, enjoys making everyone do more reading. Still, the stair is difficult enough. The guard lifts his cloak clear so he does not trip. His lantern throws wild shadows over the central newel. Snow has blown in at a slit window and gathered in a little white tongue on the inner ledge. He brushes it away with the back of his hand. It melts into his glove. Very glamorous, defending civilization from indoor snow. He reaches a wall walk or up a passage. The air there is harsher, full of moving white. The parapet stones are rimmed with frost. The world beyond is almost invisible. If he looks down into the outer court, he sees only lantern glow, roof lines, and the restless blur of flakes. If he looks outward beyond the wall, he sees nothing certain at all. Fields, road, ditch, trees, village, all are folded into one pale darkness. There is no neat agreement among architectural historians about how every smaller castle organised its watch in practice. Because records vary, buildings changed, and everyday routines often went unwritten. A royal fortress, a great magnate's castle, and a local lord's fortified residence might keep watch in different ways depending on threat, money, season, and available people. Tonight, the details are less important than the rhythm. Someone checks, someone listens, someone moves again. You hear a faint knock from far away. 2 taps, then 1. It might be the watchman at a door, it might be wood shifting. Your mind turns it into a signal because minds enjoy making patterns out of darkness. Another voice answers, too soft to understand. The sound travels through passages, softened by walls, until it reaches you as a murmur beneath the wind. You wonder what the guard fears most. Not necessarily an army. Armies are loud, expensive, and rarely subtle in a snowstorm. Perhaps he fears fire more. Fire is the old terror of crowded wooden structures. Straw-covered floors, rushes, thatch, timber roofs, cloth hangings, and people sleeping near open flames. A spark in the wrong place can undo stone confidence with terrifying speed. So the watch checks hearths. It checks lamps. It checks that no servant has left a candle too close to cloth. The most dangerous enemy tonight may be a coal that rolls from the hearth while everyone dreams. The guard may also fear theft. Not romantic theft. Not jewel heists with velvet masks, but missing tools, vanished food, a pilfered knife, a loosened horse, a stranger in the wrong courtyard. In a castle. Supplies are security, grain, weapons, tack, candles, salted meat, keys, documents, each has value. Each must stay where it belongs. The armory around you is probably part of his concern, which makes your presence on its floor just slightly awkward. You're trusted enough to sleep here, but not so trusted that no one checks the latch. A sound rises from below, a horse stamping in the stable, then another. The watchman may pause there too, speaking softly through a door, listening for distress. Horses are wealth with hooves, war, travel, hunting, status, farming, support, messenger work, all depend on animals that must be fed, groomed, sheltered, and kept calm while humans make poor decisions around them. In a blizzard, a nervous stable is a problem no one wants. The fire in the armory sinks low. Embers glow like buried cherries. Your eyes are almost closed now, but the imagined round continues. The guard passes the kitchen, where banked coals breathe under ash. He checks the door to the buttery, perhaps where ale and stores are kept. He listens near the hall, now empty except for benches, rushes. He moves through servant spaces where bodies lie close for warmth. He does not step on anyone, which is more than some saints would manage at this hour. At last. The footsteps return along the passage outside the armory. Slower now. Familiar. They pause again. The latch lifts, falls, the door holds. A small, satisfied sound comes from the other side, perhaps only breath. Then the guard walks on toward the gatehouse, where colder duty waits. You feel strangely soothed. The night is not safe because nothing can happen. The night is bearable because people are paying attention. Watchfulness becomes a blanket laid over the sleeping household. Thin but real, it covers the lord in his chamber, the servants near the kitchens, the horses below, the boy with the cold wrists, the woman by the hearth, the snoring man, and you, temporary guest of the armory floor. The storm continues outside. The guards continue inside and above and between. Their rounds stitch the castle together in darkness. One latch, one stare, one whispered answer at a time. Your breathing slows to match that pattern. Check. Listen. Move on. Check. Listen. Move on. The words become almost a lullaby. And as the watch disappears again into the stone passages, you let your eyes close, knowing that somewhere in the blizzard's roar, a lantern is still moving. The moving lantern fades from your imagination, and in the space it leaves, other voices return, not the voices in the armory exactly, because most of those have sunk into sleep. These are the scraps you heard at the gate, in the yard, near the hearth, and beneath the ordinary work of supper. They gather now because the night is long and your mind, softened by cold and firelight, has begun sorting them into shape. Taxes, London, Kent, Essex, the King, the Commons, bad counsel, burned records, broken bonds, words half spoken, then swallowed. Rumour does not sleep well in 1381. It travels faster than carts in bad weather, faster than officials would like, faster than certainty can follow. A rider brings one account, a merchant brings another, a frightened reeve adds his own, a priest repeats what someone swore was true. By the time news reaches the castle, it is no longer a single thing. It is a bundle of stories tied with fear. You lie on the hard floor beneath your cloak, staring toward the low glow of the hearth. The fire has become small enough that the room is mostly shadow, but not dark. Helmets glimmer faintly. A spear shaft catches a narrow line of ember light. Someone breathes through a blocked nose. Someone else mutters once and settles. Outside, snow is still falling, though the wind seems less angry now, more tired, as if even weather can overcome it. Earlier, while bread passed from hand to hand, the snoring man had woken enough to say that men were still being questioned on the roads. The woman had answered that anyone questioned in winter would say whatever got them indoors fastest. The old man with kindling had spoken of a village where tenants refused to perform certain labour services, then lowered his voice when he noticed the boy listening. No one used the word revolt loudly. Words can become dangerous when walls have ears, and castles have many ears. Some official, some bored, some looking for advantage. The year's unrest had already burned itself into memory. In June 1381, rebels entered London, and the young King Richard II met groups of them at Mile End and Smithfield. Leading figures like Wat Tyler and John Ball became attached to the rising in later memory, though the movement itself was broader and messier than any single name. Rebel demands included an end to serfdom, fairer rents, and the removal of hated officials. The revolt was suppressed, but the fear it produced did not vanish simply because leaders were killed or pardons withdrawn. Fear has a long aftertaste. That fear sits inside this castle like cold in stone. You imagine the Lord's chamber somewhere above or across the inner court, warmer than yours, perhaps hung with textiles to soften draughts, perhaps guarded by servants who know when to be silent. Does he sleep well tonight? Does he trust his tenants? Does he think of tax collectors, burned manorial documents, and crowds carrying tools that can become weapons? Or does he tell himself the old order is held? Because people in power often mistake survival for certainty. In the armory, authority hangs from pegs, shields, mail, helmets, spears, All of it is evidence that command can be enforced. Yet outside these walls are fields that need hands, mills that need grain, rents that need collecting, roads that need local knowledge, and villages that can become very quiet when officials arrive. Power is not as simple as stone looking down on thatch. Stone needs thatch. Lords need worry, castles need bread from somewhere. One strange detail from the revolt has clung stubbornly to later imagination. Some rebels targeted legal records, charters, and manorial documents, because written proof of obligation could be as oppressive as any weapon. Burning parchment may sound less dramatic than storming gates, but imagine the meaning. To destroy a document was to attack the memory of control itself. Of course, whether every such act was carefully political or sometimes practical. Local or opportunistic is one of those matters where the surviving evidence leaves historians still picking through smoke. You turn slightly beneath your cloak. Straw crackles under your shoulder. The shield near you gives a faint wooden tick as it cools. You wonder whether records are stored somewhere in this castle. Charters, rent rolls, accounts, lists of tenants, labour obligations, fines, debts, privileges, rights. Perhaps in a chest in the Lord's chamber, perhaps in a clerk's room. Perhaps locked away from damp and from people with very strong feelings about parchment. A castle is not only a place of arms, it is a place of paperwork, though that word feels too dry for something that could shape a person's life. A line in a roll might tell a family what it owed, what it held, what it could not do without permission. The clerk's ink could reach into the field, the cottage, the oven, the marriage bed, the inheritance. No wonder documents mattered. No wonder some people hated them. You remember the boy listening too closely when the old man spoke of villagers refusing labour? The older woman's glance had silenced the tale. Children and servants absorb the politics of a household through crumbs, errands, overheard scolding, and warnings not meant for them. He may not understand all of it, but he knows enough to know that some subjects tighten a room. There is still no tidy agreement about how revolutionary the 1381 Rising really was. Some interpretations emphasize its radical language and sweeping demands, while others point to local grievances, negotiation, and the desire to restore older rights rather than invent a new world. Lying here, you sense that both can be true in the way human anger often works. People may demand the impossible in order to make the bearable finally heard. They may speak of ancient liberties while imagining a future no one in authority wants to name. The Armory makes those questions physical. If tenants come to the gate, are they subjects, neighbours, workers, enemies? If a crowd demands charters, does the Lord parley, threaten, hide, flee? Or call for armed men if a servant has kin in the village? Where does loyalty sit in the belly? Perhaps in the wage, in fear, in affection, in habit, in whatever choice keeps someone alive until morning. You listen to the sleepers and imagine each with a thread leading outward. The snoring man may have a brother in a nearby village. The woman by the hearth may know the names of women who brew ale for the estate. The boy may have parents who owe labour or rent. The old man with kindling may remember the pestilence years, when so many died that every surviving worker became more necessary and more dangerous to command. The castle is full of people who are not separate from unrest. They are stitched into it, even when they mend straps by firelight. The Black Death, which struck England in the mid-14th century, killed such a large portion of the population that labour became scarce in many areas. Authorities tried to control wages and movement, but ordinary workers knew their value had changed. This is one reason 1381 did not come from nowhere. It grew from decades of pressure demographic shock, law, taxation, war costs, lordship, preaching, local conflict, and the stubborn human belief that suffering should not be endlessly patient. A faint sound comes from beyond the door. Perhaps the watch again. Perhaps only the castle shifting under snow. No one wakes. Your thoughts move more slowly now. Revolt becomes less like a shouting crowd and more like a murmur under the floorboards. Something present even in quiet rooms. History at bedtime is not always soothing because it is gentle. Sometimes it soothes because it lets the noise of the past settle into patterns. Cause and consequence, hunger and law, fear and shelter, a castle armory in a blizzard, and beyond it, a country still trembling from summer. The fire sinks another shade lower. The red of the embers is deep and soft, like light seen through closed eyelids. You think of roads buried in snow, villages dark under thatch, manor rolls locked in chests, guards listening from gatehouses, and people everywhere trying to sleep beneath systems larger than themselves. Some dream of safety, some dream of fairness, some simply dream of bread. You pull the cloak closer, not because the room has grown colder, though it has, but because the thought of the world outside has become wide. The armory narrows it again. Here is straw, here is smoke, here is the shield at your shoulder, here is the breathing of tired people. Here is one night in which no crowd comes to the gate, no alarm bell rings, no order shouted. For now, the rumours remain rumours. They move beyond the walls, under snow, along roads hidden, until morning. Inside, the castle listens in its sleep, and you listen with it until even the dangerous words soften, blur, and become part of the fire's low whisper. The rumours sink at last into the embers, and what remains is the simpler question of warmth, not justice, not lordship, not taxes, not whether the world beyond the gate is becoming something new, just warmth. The oldest politics of the body. Your shoulders want it, your fingers want it, your toes have written a petition in favour of it. The armory, for all its iron and authority, has become a room arranged around a small surviving fire. You lie very still and feel where heat reaches you and where it fails. Your face is warmest when turned toward the hearth. Your back is colder, especially where the castle wall drinks warmth through wool, as if it has been waiting all winter for this chance. Your knees are tucked beneath your cloak, and your breath gathers inside the fabric, damp and faintly sour but comforting. But every small pocket of heat matters, every fold is strategy. The fire is no longer lively. It has settled into a red, breathing bed of coals with one half-burned log resting across it. The log's outer skin is black and cracked. Deep within, orange lines glow like tiny roads through a dark country. When the fire shifts, a small blue flame appears, licks the air, then disappears. The hearth gives more glow than flame now, more memory than blaze. Still, it works. In medieval households, heat usually came from open fires, braziers, hearths, and later fireplaces, depending on wealth and room type. Glass windows were not common in every space, and many openings used shutters, cloth, oiled linen, or horn. Warmth was controlled with clothing, bedding, wall hangings, screens, rushes, shared spaces, and careful fire tending. In other words, central heating has not arrived to rescue anyone. People made warmth in layers, in habits, in architecture, in patience. The woman near the hearth wakes enough to stir the coals. She does not rise fully. She leans forward with the iron tool, draws a piece of wood closer to the red centre, and covers the edges with ash. The ash seems like burial, but it is preservation. A banked fire sleeps under its own grey blanket, holding life until morning. You watch the motion through half-closed eyes, impressed by the tenderness of it. Fire must be fed, but also calmed. Too much air, it burns away. Too little, it dies. Like most needy things, it requires balance and causes trouble when ignored. Smoke hangs above you in a faint layer, just visible where the coals glow. The room does have a chimney, but the wind outside has opinions. And sometimes those opinions come downward. Smoke gathers in the rafters, staining beams, darkening cobwebs, entering cloth, hair, lungs, memory. You taste it at the back of your throat. Not thick enough to drive you out, not pleasant enough to forget. A medieval winter room often smells like the fire that keeps it alive, which is a bargain people accepted because the alternative was freezing with cleaner air. Very elegant. Civilization. There is an old domestic trick, almost comically practical, of using warmed stones, bricks, or covered pans of embers to take heat into beds or enclosed spaces. You must be careful, naturally, because setting your bedding on fire is widely considered a poor sleep aid. Still, the idea is understandable. Heat is portable if you are brave, cautious, or desperate. You imagine someone richer than you, sliding a warming pan beneath linen sheets while you, by contrast, are lovingly preheating yourself beside a barrel. A sleeper nearby coughs, the sound is dry, then wet, then stops. Another sleeper mutters in a dream. The armory's air is warm enough near the hearth, but heavy. You wonder how many winter coughs begin in rooms just like this, where damp clothes steam, smoke lingers, and people sleep close because space and fuel are limited. Comfort and illness can share a blanket. The past does not give tidy choices. Medical writers of the period often understood health through humoral theory, the idea that the body's balance of fluids and qualities like hot, cold, wet, dry-shaped well-being, cold winter air, damp clothing, smoky rooms, and poor sleep could all be interpreted through that framework. You do not need to accept the theory to understand the observation. Your body, right now, has strong views on cold and damp, is less interested in Latin terminology than in whether the fire will last until dawn. The uncertainty is in the details. How warm did people actually manage to make rooms like this? And how much did conditions differ between lordly chambers, servant quarters, kitchens, towers, and working spaces? Surviving buildings can mislead, because ruins are colder than furnished rooms once were, and modern restorations cannot fully recreate the effect of bodies, textiles, fires, animals, shutters, smoke, and daily maintenance. Your armory tonight offers a modest answer. Warmth exists, but unevenly. It pools and fades. It belongs to those nearest the flame, those with the best wool, those who know where drafts travel, and those tired enough to stop caring. You pull your cloak closer over one shoulder. The wool scratches your chin. Beneath it, your body heat has softened the chill. The damp outer edge is less icy now, though still unpleasant if your ankle finds it. Your socks, such as they are, remain questionable. You flex your toes and feel them respond slowly. Good, they are still loyal. The firelight changes the weapons. Earlier, when the flames were higher, every edge seemed awake. Now the coals give a softer, redder light that makes the armory less martial and more cave-like. Spears are dark stems, shields are low curves. Armour is shadow. The room has moved from danger into drowsiness. Even iron looks tired. A faint drip continues somewhere near the door. Meltwater from boots, cloak hems, or wind-blown snow has found a path and keeps taking it. Drop. Pause. Drop. You try to place the sound in the dark. It becomes part of the rhythm, like breath. The storm outside is quieter now, or perhaps your mind has folded into sleep. There is still wind, still snow brushing against shutters, but the room's inner sounds have grown larger. The cough, the coal settling, the straw's tiny crackle under your hip. You think of all the ways medieval people chased comfort without naming it as luxury. Drying socks near the hearth, turning cloaks inside out, sharing body heat, stuffing a gap in a shutter, hanging cloth on a wall, drinking something warm, saving embers beneath ash, putting straw between skin and stone, or each act small, together. They make the night survivable. There is gentleness in this, although it is not soft. The castle does not pamper you. It tolerates you. The fire does not embrace you. It negotiates. The floor does not forgive your bones. It merely holds them. And yet, the combination begins to work. Your breathing deepens. The smoky air, unpleasant a moment ago, becomes familiar. The wool spell becomes your smell. The hard floor becomes the known ground beneath you. A log cracks softly, and one small flame rises again. It illuminates the woman's face for a moment. She is asleep now, seated upright, shawl around her shoulders, chin lowered toward her chest. Her hand rests near the iron fire tool, as if even sleep has not fully released her from duty. Then the flame falls, and her face returns to shadow. You feel the night settling into its deepest part. The castle has not become silent, but its noises have slowed. Watchmen are still moving somewhere. Horses shift below. Snow gathers above. But here, in the armory, warmth has done enough. Smoke has stung and softened. Coals have breathed. Wool has trapped your small human heat. Discomfort has not vanished, but it has become predictable. And predictability is one doorway into sleep. You let your eyes close fully. Behind the lids, the coals remain, glowing red in darkness. Your thoughts loosen. The revolt, the gatehouse, the servants, the armour, the storm, all drift apart like sparks rising into chimney smoke. What remains is the little circle of heat at the centre of the room, and your body curled within reach of it, grateful, ordinary, and almost asleep. Almost. You're almost asleep when the castle below you begins to move in small animal ways. Not the walls, not the towers, not the great stone confidence of the place, but the living creatures tucked into its lower rooms. Yards, stables, lofts, and corners. A hoof stamps somewhere beneath or beyond the armory. Then another. A dog gives a muffled bark, immediately regrets the effort, and falls quiet. Something tiny skitters near the wall, pauses, and seems to reconsider its life choices. You open your eyes just enough to see the red blur of the hearth. The coals are low, but still alive. Around you. The human sleepers remain bundled and indistinct, their breathing woven into the room. Yet now you hear the other household, the one that does not care about rank except when rank drops food. A castle in 1381 is not a human-only building. It is a crowded creature of many species. Horses are kept for travel, warfare, hunting, carrying messages, and status. Dogs serve as guards, hunting companions, vermin hunters, and warm, inconvenient friends. Cats slip through stores and kitchens in pursuit of mice, chickens, geese, pigs, cattle. And sheep may not all sleep inside the main castle spaces, but they belong to the wider estate rhythm. Rats and mice, naturally, attend without invitation, as they have always considered themselves part of civilization. The stable sounds come again. Heavier now, a horse shifts its weight and knocks wood. You imagine the warm darkness below stalls lined with straw, breath steaming in the cold, leather tack hanging stiff from pegs, oats stored carefully away from damp and thieves with tails. The animals are warmer than you in some ways, wrapped in their own heat, surrounded by hay and bodies in other ways. They are trapped in the same winter bargain. Shelter, yes, a bell crowding, restless for sleep, and not nearly enough choice in the matter. A groom must have checked them earlier. Horses cannot simply be parked like carts and trusted until morning. They need feed, water, dry bedding, attention to legs and hooves, and a calm hand when weather makes strange noises. A good horse is wealth, mobility, labour, and prestige. Losing one is not merely sad, it's financially catastrophic, which is the medieval way of making everyone suddenly tender. There is still disagreement among specialists about just how many horses a given smaller castle household might keep in ordinary times, because numbers shifted with season, travel, visiting retainers, military need, and the wealth of the lord. Written accounts might record fodder purchases or stable expenses, but they do not always give a neat picture of how the place felt on a storm night. From where you lie? The answer is simple enough. Enough horses for the air below to sound alive. Enough for grooms to sleep lightly. Enough for the castle to have a heartbeat with hooves. The dog barks again, softer this time. Someone in the passage mutters at it. The dog stops. You admire this chain of command. Kings may struggle to govern kingdoms, but one sleepy servant has silenced a dog with a single tired syllable. This may be the true foundation of medieval order. Dogs in noble households could be highly valued, especially hunting dogs. Lords hunted not only for food, but for status, training, entertainment, and control of landscapes. Specialized hounds might be fed, housed, named, and treasured. Other dogs lived more practically around kitchens, yards, and gates. Some guarded, some scavenged. Some probably performed the timeless canine duty of standing exactly where a busy person needed to step. You can almost feel one curled near a kitchen hearth, nose tucked under tail, dreaming of bones that may or may not exist. Cats are quieter. You do not hear them, which is how cats prefer history to record them. Still, they are likely somewhere in the castle's working spaces, especially near stores. Grain attracts mice. Mice attract cats. Cats attract divided opinions. Because human beings have always alternated between reverence for cats and suspicion that they know too much. In medieval Europe, cats could be valued for controlling vermin, though they also carried associations in folklore that were not always flattering. The cat, meanwhile, remained magnificently uninterested in public relations. Near your wall, the tiny skitter comes again. Mouse, surely. You choose mouse. It is bedtime. We are not upgrading the situation to rat unless absolutely required. Something nudges a straw stem, then stills. The shield by your shoulder suddenly feels less like protection and more like a roof over someone else's midnight road. You keep your hand inside your cloak. Generosity towards small creatures. Remember is still your policy. The castle's stores are a paradise for vermin if not carefully guarded grain. Bread, cheese, dried peas, smoked meat, scraps, rushes, fabric, leather. Everything edible, chewable, nestable, or merely disrespectable has appeal. Cats, traps, sealed bins, raised storage, and constant sweeping help. But no medieval household fully defeats mice. It negotiates, it loses some grain. It wins some mornings, the war continues. A peculiar remedy sometimes mentioned in old household or medical lore involved using animal products in ways that modern readers find deeply alarming. From fats in salves to dung in certain traditional treatments. The medieval world did not divide the animal body into neat categories of acceptable and unacceptable as modern comfort does. If something was believed useful, someone somewhere probably tried it, and someone else probably complained about the smell. You remember the earlier thought about strange cleaning mixtures and decide the past is very committed to being practical at the expense of ambience. A horse blows hard below a long, wet sigh. It travels through the structure in a way that feels oddly comforting. Large animals make buildings feel less empty. Their warmth, breath, and weight anchor the night. You imagine a stable boy curled in a corner near them, perhaps warmer than you, perhaps not, listening for signs of distress. The horses know his smell, he knows which one bites, which one kicks, which one needs soothing during wind. Human and animal routines knot together until they become household knowledge. The social world of the castle includes animals at every level. The lord's favourite hunting dog may receive better scraps than a poor labourer's child, which is not a cheerful comparison. But history is rarely interested in protecting our mood. A warhorse might be named, trained, guarded, and valued more than many human lives in the accounts of the household. Chickens may be counted as provisions, Pigs may be driven through woods to feed on acorns. Oxen and horses may pull carts. Bees, if kept nearby, give wax as well as honey. And candles need wax if a household wants cleaner light than tallow can offer. You smell animal life in the armory too: leather straps, wool cloaks, horn lantern panels, feathers on arrows, maybe glue made from animal materials, sinew or hide in bindings, and parchment records elsewhere in the castle. The medieval built world is full of transformed animals. Even when no creature stands beside you, their bodies have become objects: tools, light, clothing, sound. Modern life hides this. The Armory does not. The dog gives one final huff and settles. The horse sounds fade into slow shifting. The mouse, or whatever tiny citizen it is, has moved on, perhaps disappointed by the lack of crumbs near your bed. You consider leaving a bit of bread next time. Then remember, there should not be a next time. One night sleeping in an armory during a blizzard is educational. Making it a habit would be eccentric. The evidence from household accounts, stable records, hunting manuals, and archaeology does not always let researchers reconstruct the full emotional bond between medieval people and animals. Some animals were tools, food, property, and symbols. Some were companions. Often they were several of these at once. A hound might be beloved and still valued for performance. A horse might be cherished and still traded. A cat might be tolerated only because it reduces the mouse population and because it refuses to leave. In the dark, these categories soften. You hear only breathing, hooves, distant paws, tiny feet, and the occasional creak of wood. The castle becomes less like a fortress and more like a winter barn with towers, full of bodies trying to stay warm until light returns. Human fear, animal instinct, smoke, straw, hunger, and sleep all share the same stone shell. You pull your cloak under your chin and let the animal sounds become part of the lullaby. The horse below shifts, the dog sighs. The unseen mouse continues its private business along the wall. None of them knows or cares that the year is 1381, that taxes have angered kingdoms, that armour hangs above you, that snow has buried the road. They know warmth, hunger, shelter, noise, scent, and the nearness of others, and perhaps that is enough for this hour. The castle breathes with all its creatures, large and small, useful and beloved, tolerated and hunted. You breathe with them too, another warm animal under wool, curled near the last red coals while winter presses its cold face against the stone. The castle breathes with all its creatures for a while, and then even the animals grow quiet. The horse below settles. The dog's last sigh disappears into the timber. The tiny movement near the wall becomes nothing more than the idea of a mouse, which is much easier to sleep beside than the certainty of one. You rest in that softer quiet, eyes closed, cloak tucked beneath your chin, until a murmur rises from near the hearth. At first you think it is a dream. The words are too low to catch, shaped more by breath than voice. Then you open your eyes a little and see the woman by the fire awake again, her head bent, one hand moving slowly over the beads or knots of something held in her lap. She is not performing for anyone. No one else seems to notice. The fire glows red on her cheek and turns the edge of her shawl into a dark line against the wall. Prayer at night feels different from prayer in daylight. In daylight, there are bells, church doors, holy images, parish obligations, feast days, fast days, priests, sermons, processions, and all the public machinery of faith. At night, prayer becomes smaller and more private. A whisper, a crossed thumb, a phrase repeated under smoke, charm tucked under cloth. A hope made quiet enough not to wake the person beside you. 14th century England was deeply shaped by Christianity. The rhythms of the church ordered the year through holy days. Fasting seasons, saints' feasts, masses, confession, penance, another great cycle of birth, marriage, death, and burial. Even people who grumbled at priests or failed to live like saints inhabited a world where heaven, hell, Purgatory, sin, grace, relics, blessing, and divine judgment were not decorative beliefs. They were part of reality as firmly as weather and rent. You lie still and listen to the woman's murmur. Perhaps she says an Ave Maria. Perhaps a Paternoster. Perhaps a prayer for protection against storm, sickness, fire, violence, or whatever unnamed worry has followed her into the night. The exact words are lost beneath the wind and the slow tick of embers, but the tone is clear. She is placing the room, or herself, or someone she loves, into the care of powers greater than the castle wall, which, considering the castle wall currently feels like the strongest thing in the world, says something. Near the armory door hangs a small object you did not notice before. It may be a cross scratched into wood, a token tied with thread, or only a mark made by use and shadow. In this light, certainty is rude, but you notice how such things gather at thresholds, crosses, blessings, marks, holy words, bits of plant, little signs against danger. Doors are anxious places. They separate insider from outside, safety from exposure, known from unknown. It makes sense that people would protect them with more than a latch. There were many devotional objects in medieval life rosaries, pilgrim badges, ampullae that held holy water or oil, small crosses, saints' images, prayer rolls, and blessed items associated with shrines. Some were precious, some were cheap enough for ordinary people to own. A pilgrim badge stamped from lead alloy might show a saint's symbol and could be worn on clothing as proof of travel, devotion, or hope for protection. Medieval faith was not only in books and churches, it was pinned to hats, hung near beds, kissed at thresholds, carried in pouches and worn smooth by anxious fingers. The woman lifts her hand briefly to her forehead and chest. The gesture is small, almost hidden by her shawl. Then she wraps the cord or beads and tucks them away. She looks toward the fire, not at you. And for a moment you see how tired she is. Not dramatically tired, not storybook tragic. Just worn by work, weather, and whatever private griefs have no record. Then she lowers her head again, and the room returns to shadow. A curious piece of medieval belief involved written charms used for protection or healing, sometimes combining Christian phrases, sacred names, symbols, and older formulas whose meanings could become blurred over time. A scrap of parchment with holy words might be worn on the body, placed near a woman in childbirth, used against fever, or carried for safety. Modern people may separate prayer, medicine, and magic into tidy boxes, but medieval life often let them overlap like blankets on a cold bed. If it might help, and if it called upon holy power, someone was willing to try. You can understand this more easily now than you might have by daylight. In a warm modern room, it is simple to be smug. In a blizzard, on a hard floor, among weapons, in a year when revolt has rattled the kingdom and smoke keeps wandering into your lungs, protective words feel less strange. Human beings reach for reassurance wherever it can be found. Some reach for a spear, some for a saint, some for both. Because why limit your options when the roof is creaking? The church's official teaching did not always sit comfortably with popular practices. Clergy could approve certain blessings, prayers, relics, and sacramentals while condemning charms they saw as superstitious or improperly magical. Yet ordinary people lived in the messy middle. They wanted healing for a child, safety on a road, protection from fire, help with childbirth, mercy for the dead, and a good harvest. Theology might draw leaners, fear and hope often crossed them in the dark. The evidence gives no simple answer about where devotion ended and magic began in everyday medieval practice. Some researchers emphasize the church's ability to shape belief through ritual and teaching. Others point to local habits, folk practices, household charms, and the flexible ways people blended official religion with older protective customs. Here in the Armory, the uncertainty feels natural. A whispered prayer beside a hearth can be sincere faith, practical comfort, family habit, and a shield against fear all at once. A faint bell sounds somewhere beyond the room, so distant it might be imagined. It may mark one of the night hours, perhaps from a chapel within the castle, or from a nearby church if the wind happens to carry it. Monastic communities kept formal offices through the night, and while this castle is not a monastery, religious time still shapes medieval ears. Bells tell people when to pray. When to gather, when to work, when someone has died, when danger approaches, when the community must look up. You picture the castle chapel, if there is one here, cold and dim, with a small altar, candles burned low, painted figures on the wall, barely visible in gloom. Perhaps a chaplain sleeps nearby, wrapped in his own blankets, ready to say Mass in the morning if the weather allows the household to assemble. The chapel would be a privileged space, yet even here in the Armory, sacred presence has slipped in through whispered words and little marks. Holiness travels well, it does not mind smoke. You think of the people outside the walls too. Villagers and cottagers may be saying their own prayers as snow heaps against doors. A mother touches a child's forehead. An old man mutters a psalm he half remembers. Someone worries about a cow in a byre. Someone prays that the tax collector will not return soon. Someone prays for the king, someone does not. The same faith that binds the realm can also hold very different hopes inside it. The revolt earlier that year had its religious voices as well. John Ball, the radical priest associated with the Rising, became famous for preaching ideas about equality and corruption in ways that later chroniclers found deeply troubling. Whether every phrase attributed to him was recorded accurately is uncertain, but the link between religious language and social anger is clear enough. In 1381, prayer is not always quiet. Sometimes scripture and sermon become tinder, but not here, not at this hour. The Armory holds the private kind of devotion, the kind that asks for survival until morning, and forgiveness for what cannot be repaired tonight. The coals glow, the woman sleeps again. The cord or beads are hidden. The little mark near the door, if it is a mark at all, keeps its post in science. You close your eyes and let the sacred and practical settle together. Fire for warmth, latch for safety, prayer for what neither fire nor latch can manage. The castle is made of stone, but the people inside it are made of breath, fear, hunger, memory and longing. They need walls, yes, they also need meaning. They need something to whisper to when the storm is stronger than their plans. Your own breathing slows. Perhaps you do not know the right words for this century. Perhaps you do not know which saint guards travellers in snowbound armories. Still, you feel the old human impulse rise softly. Let morning come. Let the fire last. Let the roof hold. Let everyone sleeping under this winter dark wake again. And with that unspoken wish resting beside you, the Armory becomes gentler. Not because the weapons vanish, not because the cold leaves, but because someone has named the night's fears in a whisper and allowed them to grow quiet. The whispered wish stays with you as the night deepens, and for a while you do not know whether you are sleeping or only resting beneath the surface of sleep. The Armory blurs, the coals blur, the helmets become dark bowls, the shields become low hills. Your body has folded itself into the smallest useful shape, but winter is patient, and after a time it finds the places where warmth has thinned. First your nose grows cold, then one shoulder, then the toes you had so carefully persuaded back into comfort begin to doubt the entire arrangement. You draw your knees closer under the cloak and tuck the fabric beneath your feet. It helps a little, not enough for luxury, but enough for the ongoing medieval compromise between misery and endurance. A cough wakes someone across the room. It comes in 3 rough bursts, then stops. The man shifts, clears his throat, and reaches for a cup near his head. He drinks, sighs, and lies down again. A moment later, the woman by the hearth opens her eyes, listens, then reaches into a small pouch hanging from her belt. She removes something wrapped in cloth and places it near the warmth of the fire. You watch through narrow eyes, more curious than awake. The cloth opens to reveal dried leaves and perhaps a few shriveled berries or roots. She breaks a little into a wooden cup, pours hot water from a small pot that has been kept near the coals, and lets it steep. The steam rises faintly, carrying a bitter, green scent into the smoky room. Then she passes the cup to the coughing man. He props himself on one elbow and drinks with the solemn obedience of someone who has been told this will help, and is too tired to argue. Medieval medicine drew from several traditions learned university medicine based on humoral theory, monastic and household remedies, local herbal knowledge, charms, prayers, and practical nursing. A castle household might have access to trained physicians only occasionally, depending on wealth and location, but everyday care often came from women, servants, monks, friars, local healers, apothecaries, and people who simply knew what had worked before. Most illness was handled close to the hearth, not in a dramatic chamber with important men discussing Latin over a fainting noble. The drink smells sharp enough to wake a ghost. Perhaps it contains sage, horehound, hyssop, or another herb used for coughs and winter complaints. You cannot know from where you lie. And frankly, medieval herbal identification by firelight is not a hobby to begin at 3 a.m. The man drinks, grimaces, and returns the cup. This is reassuring in its way. Medicine that tastes bad has enjoyed a long and confident career. There is a wonderfully odd remedy tradition in medieval medical writings that includes ingredients modern people would rather not invite into the kitchen-powdered animal parts. Strange fats, dung in certain preparations, and mixtures whose smell alone might convince illness to leave out of embarrassment. Yet beside these alarming ideas were many sensible comforts: warmth, rest, broth, clean cloth when available, honey for the throat, herbs with real soothing qualities, and the deep practical knowledge that a sick person needs tending. The past is not simply foolish. It is a cupboard where good observation and very questionable confidence sit side by side. Your own throat feels dry from smoke. You swallow and taste ash. The woman notices your movement, because apparently she is built from wool, fatigue, and surveillance. She holds up the cup in silent question. You hesitate, then nod. The cup reaches you by way of the snoring man, who is no longer snoring and seems offended by this development. You take it in both hands. The wood is warm, the steam brushes your face. The drink tastes bitter, earthy, and faintly sweet beneath the bitterness, as if someone once introduced it to honey from a distance. It is not delicious. It is not meant to be. It slides down your throat and leaves heat behind. You pass the cup back with a nod of thanks, and the woman gives one small satisfied look before wrapping the herbs again. Comfort in winter is often medicinal even when no one calls it that. Wool socks, dry straw, hot broth, a warmed cup, a hand checking a fevered brow, someone making sure a sleeper is not rolled too close to the hearth. These are not grand cultures, but they help a body remain a body rather than becoming a complaint with teeth. Ideas about sickness in the 14th century often included the balance of hot, cold, wet and dry qualities. Winter complaints might be understood through cold and damp, while certain foods, herbs, or treatments were chosen because they were thought to warm, dry, moisten, or otherwise restore balance. Modern science would not accept the whole system, but the careful attention to climate, diet, bodily state, and season was not random. People watched patterns. They argued from what they believed the body was. Sometimes they helped. Sometimes they absolutely did not. But the intention was rarely casual. The uncertain part, even for modern researchers, is how much ordinary people followed learned medical theory in daily practice, and how much they relied on household tradition, local remedies, affordability, availability, and advice passed from neighbour to neighbour. A noble household might own medical texts or hire skilled practitioners, yet a servant with a cough in an armory still receives a bitter cup from a woman by the fire. Written medicine and lived medicine overlap, but they are not the same thing. The cup returns to the hearth. The coughing man lies back down. His breathing is rough for a while, then steadier. Perhaps the herbs help, perhaps warmth helps, perhaps being given something helps because it means someone noticed. Care itself has a flavour. You think of winter aches beyond this room, chilblains on fingers and toes, smoke-irritated lungs, damp clothing that never quite dries, toothaches made worse by cold, old injuries stiffening in bad weather, hands cracked from washing, hauling, mending, grinding, chopping and carrying. Medieval winter is not merely picturesque snow on towers, it is skin-splitting at the knuckles, at a bullhead. It is a wet hem against the ankle. It is waking to find the water in a vessel filled with ice. It is sleeping in your clothes and still being cold. And yet people made comforts. They had to. They lined shoes with straw, they layered linen and wool. They used hoods, mittens, cloaks, caps, shawls and blankets. They warmed food and drink. They sat closer than modern politeness prefers. They shared beds, benches, chambers, and animals' heat. They rubbed stiff hands, massaged sore limbs, wrapped aching joints, and told one another, perhaps not gently, to stop moaning because everyone was cold. You smile into the darkness at that thought, not visibly, perhaps. More a small inward smile. Human tenderness often arrives wearing a rude little hat. Drink this, move over, keep your feet under the cloak. Do not sleep with your damp sleeve near the fire. Unless you want to wake up dramatic. Care does not always sound sweet. Sometimes it sounds like management. A little steam rises from your own cloak now where the damp has warmed. The smell is not noble, wet wool, smoke, and tired humanity. But the bitter drink has left your throat softer, and the heat in your hands lingers after the cup is gone. You adjust the rolled cloth beneath your head and find, by some miracle of exhaustion, a slightly better angle. Outside, the storm has fallen into a deep hush. Snow still moves, but the wind no longer claws so sharply. The castle seems less besieged and more buried. Beneath that burying, the armory holds its small remedies coals under ash, herbs in cloth, broth in memory, wool around bodies, and the shared understanding that discomfort need not be faced alone. The woman by the hearth tucks the pouch back at her belt and settles again. The coughing man is quiet. The snoring man resumes, cautiously at first, then with renewed artistic confidence. You close your eyes and let the warmth in your throat spread down into your chest. It is not a cure for winter, nothing here is, but it is a kindness measured in steam, bitterness, and a wooden cup passed hand to hand. And in this castle, on this frozen night, kindness is one of the better medicines available. The kindness of the bitter cup lingers after the taste is gone, and the armory slips into the hour when even discomfort becomes drowsy. This is the deepest part of the night, the hour that feels less like time and more like a heavy blanket laid over the world. The fire is no longer something you look at directly. It is a red presence behind your eyelids, pulsing softly whenever you drift near wakefulness. The storm outside has settled into a muted hush, as though the snow has grown tired of making its point. You do not know how long you have slept. Perhaps only minutes, perhaps a full hour. Medieval nights do not come with glowing numbers beside the bed, which is probably healthy for the soul but inconvenient for the anxious. Time is measured by coals, bells, footsteps, dreams, and this changing shape of cold when you wake. It is not because anything dramatic happens, it is because your hip has begun a formal complaint against the floor. You shift slowly, trying not to crackle the straw too much. This is impossible. Straw is not discreet. It announces every movement with the enthusiasm of a village gossip. A sleeper nearby sniffs, turns over, and settles again. You pause, listening. No one truly wakes. Good. You roll slightly onto your back, then regret that. Then settle halfway on your side. The universal position of someone negotiating with a hard surface. The armory around you is almost black now. Only the hearth keeps the room from disappearing completely. In the low glow, the weapons and armour have lost their individual edges. They are no longer spears, shields, helmets, straps, mail, and tools. They are humps, lines, curves, dim verticals, patient darkness. The room has become less an armory and more a cave of stored shapes. Even the locked chest at your back feels less like property and more like a small cliff. People in 14th century Europe often slept according to household rhythms rather than the modern ideal of one private. Uninterrupted night, in many settings. Sleep could be broken by prayer, fire tending, animal care, watch duties, nursing, cold illness, or ordinary crowding. Some evidence from later and earlier periods has led researchers to discuss segmented sleep, with people waking during the night before sleeping again. Though how widely that pattern applied across classes and seasons remains difficult to pin down. Here, on this floor, the idea makes immediate sense. Sleep is not a smooth road, it is a path with roots. You wake, you listen, you adjust, you drift. That is the pattern. A memory rises without permission, the gatehouse teeth of the portcullis. The guard's lantern, the snow shining in the yard, then another bread passed in pieces, the boy's cold wrists, the woman mending the strap, the horse blowing beneath the floor. Your mind moves through the night as if sorting objects on a shelf. Each memory has a texture: iron, wool, smoke, onion, leather, snow, bitter herbs, prayer. This is how fatigue works. It makes the present porous. The room remains here, but other places pass through it. You think of the road you travelled before the storm overtook you, a white track vanishing behind your boots. You think of the village roofs beyond the wall, the people sleeping under thatch of the fields under snow, the manor records that may be locked away in some dry chamber. You think of summer unrest beneath winter silence. The year 1381 lies under the snow too, not gone, only covered. A small sound comes from the hearth ash settling inward. Then a tiny crack, like a twig breaking under a burr. The woman by the fire wakes at once. Or perhaps she was never fully asleep. She leans forward, studies the coals, and decides they can wait. Her face is barely visible. She lowers herself back, wraps her shawl tighter, and becomes still again. You wonder how many nights have trained her to wake for small changes in fire. This is a kind of knowledge no chronicle celebrates, yet the room depends on it. There is an old belief that dreams in the hours before dawn could carry special weight, sometimes treated as more truthful or spiritually meaningful than dreams earlier in the night. Medieval dream interpretation drew on classical, biblical, and popular traditions, and people might wonder whether a dream came from God, the body, the devil, memory, or simply too much supper. You consider this carefully and decide that any dream caused by sleeping beside a barrel in wet wool should probably not be used for major life decisions. Still, the boundary between waking and dreaming grows thin. For a moment, you imagine the helmet speaking in polite whispers. One complains about rust, another asks whether morning has arrived. A spear clears its throat like a tired clerk. Then you blink, and the room returns to itself. No talking helmets, just firelight, smoke, and a brain trying to entertain itself without permission. The body can make mysteries in the dark. A numb arm feels like someone else's hand. A draft becomes a presence. A drip becomes a footstep. Your own heartbeat inside your ear sounds briefly like knocking. You lift your head, listen, and hear only the deep quiet after snow. You lie down again, slightly embarrassed. though no one is awake to judge you. Excellent, medieval dignity preserved. The study of ordinary medieval emotions remains complicated because the sources were often written by elites, clerics, officials, or chroniclers with their own purposes. The feelings of servants, guards, travellers, and labourers must be approached through fragments court records, household accounts, letters, literature, sermons, objects, buildings, and careful imagination. What did a half-frozen traveller feel in a castle armoury at night? The record may not say. Your aching hip has opinions. You feel fear, but not sharply, gratitude, but not sentimentally, curiosity, though it is fading, loneliness, perhaps, but softened by the breathing of strangers. You do not belong here, yet you are not alone. The room holds you as it holds everyone else, without ceremony. That is enough. Another bell sounds somewhere far off, or maybe it is only a metal fitting shifting in the cold. The note is faint and single, fading before you can decide if it is a bell. The night has turned another notch toward morning. If it is not, your mind has invented progress because it wants dawn. Either way, the thought comforts you. You tuck your hands beneath your arms again. Your fingers find warmth there. Your feet are not warm, exactly, but they are no longer miserable enough to dominate civilization. The bitter drink has settled in your chest. Your breathing becomes slow. The room's smells, once separate, have blended into one thick winter scent smoke. Wool, leather, straw, iron, ash, damp stun and sleeping bodies. It is not clean, it is not unpleasant anymore, it is simply where you are. The snow outside continues its quiet work, burying the yard, softening the road, making the world wait. No cartwheels, no voices at the gate, no market noise, no field labour, only the castle and the storm and the long patience before dawn. In this suspended hour, status seems less loud. The lord, the servant, the guard, the traveller, the horse, the mouse in the straw, all are waiting for light. Some wait in better blankets, which should not be forgotten, but all wait. Your thoughts become slower, longer, less finished. You think of how the history you see is often told in events, and yet most lives are made of hours like this one cold. Smoke, half-sea of sleep, a shared room, a small kindness, a sound in the dark, a body turning over because the floor is hard. Revolts matter, kings matter, laws matter, but so does the moment when someone covers embers with ash so the morning fire can be born from them. The coals pulse once, then dim. Your eyelids close, this time. When the helmets blur, they do not become voices, they become only darkness. The armory recedes, the castle recedes. Even the ache in your hip loosens its grip and floats away from the centre of attention. Dawn is still far off, but not endless. The night has a far shore, even if you cannot see it yet. You breathe in, you breathe out, somewhere beyond the wall. Snow falls without hurry, and inside, among resting weapons and sleeping strangers, you drift again into the deep, uneven mercy of winter sleep. Sleep takes you again, not deeply, but enough that the armory slips away and returns in pieces. You dream of snow falling upward, of shields turning into moons, of the gatehouse lantern swinging like a star caught on a hook. Then, without any clear border, the dream thins. The room presses back into being, straw under your cheek, wool against your mouth, smoke in your throat. A low red glow at the hearth, a sound that is not the storm. At first you cannot name it. Then it comes again, a soft scrape from somewhere beyond the armory, followed by the muted clatter of wood against wood. Not alarm, not danger. Work! The castle is beginning to wake before the sky has committed itself to morning. This is not a sudden awakening. No cheerful chorus, no dramatic sunrise pouring through glass. The castle wakes like an old animal, joint by joint. First a servant near the hearth lifts her head, then a guard shifts in the passage, then someone coughs near the kitchen, a pail bumps a threshold, a door opens carefully, because cold is waiting on the other side like an unpaid debt collector. The air changes, night is not over, but it has lost its authority. You open your eyes. The armory is dim and grey now, not with daylight exactly, but with the faint loosening of darkness. The fire has survived under ash. This feels like a victory. The woman who tended it through the night leans forward, rakes the coals gently, and feeds them small pieces of kindling. At first, nothing happens. Then one ember brightens, a thread of smoke rises, a small flame catches and curls around the wood, thin as a whisper. There is a lovely patience in this act. No match, no lighter, no little clicks of modern confidence. Morning begins because someone saved last night carefully enough. In many medieval households, keeping embers alive was an ordinary but important task. Since rekindling fire from scratch took effort and tools, fire was not a background utility, it was a responsibility. And the person who managed it quietly held part of the household's comfort in her hands. The flame grows. It paints her face amber. She looks tired, creased from an upright sleep, but not surprised to be awake. People who rise before dawn do not spend much energy resenting dawn. They have made their peace with it, or at least they have stopped expecting an apology. Outside the armory, the scrape comes again. A broom, perhaps, rushes being pushed aside, ash being gathered. Someone is clearing the passage while the rest of the household still lies in layers of wool and dreams. The sound is rhythmic and dry. Sweep, pause, sweep. A small cough, sweep again. Soon another sound joins it, the heavy stirring of the kitchen. You cannot see the kitchen from here, but you can imagine it by smell before anything else. Damp ash, revived coals, old grease, yeast, grain, onions, smoke thickened by new heat. Bakers and cooks in a household like this often began work before full daylight, because bread, pottage, ale, and hot food took time, fuel, and coordination. A noble household's day was built on labour that started while important people were still asleep and perhaps dreaming that meals simply appeared through divine favour. A pleasant belief, but not one shared by the kitchen staff. A boy passes the armory door, then backs up and peeks inside. It is the same boy from the night before, or perhaps another one with the same universal expression of cold, hunger, and unwilling usefulness. His hair sticks up under his cap. He carries a basket of kindling and has the look of someone who has been awake for exactly long enough to consider it unfair. The woman at the hearth murmurs an instruction. He nods, vanishes, and returns with more wood. You sit up slowly. Your body protests in departments. Neck first, hip second, ankles third, back. With a long memorandum, sleeping on an armory floor has not made you stronger. It has merely made you informed. You roll your shoulders and feel straw clinging to your cloak. When you brush it away, more appears. Straw is like gossip, impossible to remove completely. Around the room, other sleepers begin to stir. The man who snored so confidently through half the night wakes with a start, as though surprised by his own survival. He rubs his face with both hands, then reaches for his boots. They are not fully dry, but they are less wet than before, which in this castle qualifies as progress. Another sleeper sits upright, hair flattened on one side, and blinks at the fire like a man trying to remember which century he belongs to. A strange little morning habit catches your attention. One man pulls dried straw from inside his boots before putting them on, using it as rough insulation and moisture control. Straw in footwear was a practical trick in cold or wet conditions, cheap and available, if not exactly luxurious. You imagine a modern advertisement for it, and immediately decide no one would buy it unless the packaging said heritage comfort and charge too much. Here, it is just what works. The sounds below grow livelier. Horses stamp. A stable door groans. Someone speaks in a low, soothing voice, the kind used with animals and difficult relatives. Harness rings clink. A dog shakes itself. Collar or tags making a soft rattle, then sneezes. The castle's animal household has accepted mourning with varying degrees of grace. There remains some uncertainty among researchers about the exact timing and sequence of daily routines in many medieval castle households, especially smaller ones where records are thin. Great households left ordinances, accounts, and instructions. But lived practice shifted with weather, season, rank, and urgency. This morning, the order feels practical rather than formal. Fire first, animals early, kitchen always, guards checked, floors cleared, people fed as soon as possible. Because no hierarchy functions well when everyone is cold and hungry, however hard it may try. The woman hands you a look that says you should move your bedding before someone needs the space. It is not unkind. The armory is becoming itself again, and your temporary kingdom along the wall must be dissolved. You fold the borrowed cloak as neatly as your stiff fingers allow, and set the rolled cloth where it was given to you. Your own cloak feels smoky, damp at the hem, and oddly dear. It carried you through the night. This is how attachments form. Apparently shared suffering and wool. The room brightens by small degrees. Not sunlight yet, just pallor at the shutter edges. The storm has faded to a soft fall, or perhaps stopped entirely. Snow muffles the outer court so deeply that the morning sounds seem closer and smaller. No cartwheels, no loud yard traffic, just boots, doors, breath, brooms, animals, and fire. The armory's objects regain their names. The dark thicket becomes spears. The black mound becomes mail. The sleeping faces become shields. The helmet on the bench is only a helmet again. Dented, cold, waiting for hands. A servant lifts it, wipes moisture from its rim, and sets it back. The day's care begins before the day's danger. That may be the most medieval sentence in the room. You stand carefully. Your feet prickle. Your back complains again, but less convincingly now that you are upright. Warmth from the revived fire reaches your knees. The woman pours a little hot liquid into a cup. Not enough to call breakfast, but enough to welcome the throat back to service. She passes it to the older man first, then the guard, then you. It tastes thin, warm and smoky, perfect. Somewhere farther off, a bell rings once, clearer than the uncertain night sound. Morning, then, or near enough. The castle answers not with celebration, but with motion. Doors open, feet cross stone. Someone laughs quietly at something in the yard. Someone else says a word that sounds like a complaint about snow, which is fair. A pail sloshes. A latch drops. A rooster, either nearby or deeply ambitious, attempts to announce the day through thick winter air. You step aside as two servants enter to fetch equipment. The armory is no longer your shelter alone. It is a working room again, filling with tasks, hands, and purpose. You feel almost embarrassed to have slept among its tools, as if you borrowed the castle's serious face for a night and drooled on it slightly. But no one seems offended. The storm made allowances. Morning now withdraws them. You look once more at the hearth. Last night's coals have become today's flame. The night watch has become morning work. The sleeping household has become a slow machinery of need. In this waking, there is no grand history, no proclamation, no rebel crowd at the gate, only the daily miracle of people rising cold, tired, and imperfect, then beginning again. The sky beyond the shutter grows paler. The castle has not fully woken, but it is waking. And you, stiff from the floor, smoky as a hearthrug, and strangely comforted by the soft labour around you, wake with it. The waking gathers speed without ever becoming hurried. That is the strange thing about morning in the castle. Everyone seems to have more to do than time should allow. Yet no one moves with the bright panic of modern lateness. There are no clocks shouting from walls, no alarms shrieking beside beds, no glowing rectangles demanding that someone answer 12 messages before breakfast instead. There are bells, habits, hunger, weather, rank, and the old pressure of work that has to be done whether anyone feels poetic about it or not. You stand near the wall, keeping out of the way, which is already the most useful contribution you can offer. The armory has shrugged off its nighttime softness. The sleeping bundles have become people again. Cloaks are shaken, boots pulled on, belts tightened, caps tugged low, the borrowed bedding is folded, the straw is pushed aside, the hearth is fed until flames rise properly, licking the new wood with a lively sound that seems almost cheerful after the red hush of the night. A guard enters from the passage, bringing with him a gust of colder air and the smell of the yard. Snow has stopped falling, or nearly stopped, but it clings to him in small patches one shoulder, the edge of his hood, the crease of his boot. His face is pale with cold and rough with sleeplessness. He does not speak at first. He crosses to the rack, takes a spear, checks the shaft with both hands, and examines the head in the growing light. His fingers move along the wood, feeling for cracks. This is not theatrical. It is morning maintenance. A weapon that fails when needed is worse than no weapon at all, because it first gives confidence and then takes it back. In 14th century castles, arms and armour required regular attention, especially in damp weather. Iron rusted, leather stiffened or rotted, bowstring suffered from moisture, wooden shafts warped, and buckles or straps could fail with use. The armory's morning is therefore not just about preparing for battle, it is about preventing decay. Most days, the enemy is not a siege force, it is damp, neglect, and the human temptation to say, "Good enough," when good enough has not been inspected. Another man, or perhaps an armourer or a trusted servant, lifts the mail from its peg. The rings whisper as they slide over one another. A soft metallic rainfall. He holds it near the fire but not too close, shaking it lightly, checking places where rust might begin. The mail looks heavier in morning grey than it did by firelight. Night made it mysterious. Morning makes it work. You remember, with sleepy fondness, how the helmets seemed to have faces in the dark. Now they are simply helmets again. Cold bowls of metal with dents and straps that need care. One is set on the bench. The man wipes its rim with a cloth, frowns at the lining, and calls for a strap. The woman who tended the fire hands him one without looking up, as if she knew before he asked. This is the quiet elegance of a working household people who have repeated a task so often that words become optional. Nearby, the boy sweeps straw back from the main path across the floor. His broom is made from twigs bound to a handle, rough but effective. He moves ash, crumbs, broken straw, and the dirt brought in by boots. When he reaches your sleeping corner, he finds a lost crumb from last night and flicks it away. Somewhere, a mouse is denied breakfast. History is harsh. A small oddity of household order appears when the boy gathers the mess into a shallow basket, rather than simply pushing it out the door. Used rushes, straw, ash, and scraps could sometimes be collected for disposal. Composting, animal bedding, or other lowly purposes depending on condition and place. Very little in a medieval household is instantly waste if it can still serve one more undignified function. Even dirt may be given a second career. The hierarchy of the room also reassembles itself. Last night, under snow and exhaustion, everyone seemed reduced to bodies near a fire. This morning, roles return. The guard takes the better place near the rack because he has a reason. The boy lowers his eyes when corrected. The woman directs without raising her voice. But certain men still expect tools to appear in their hands. A senior servant steps in and the room adjusts around him. You see rank not as a grand announcement, but as tiny movements: who stands, who waits, who asks, who answers, who touches the locked chest, who does not. The locked chest is opened at last. A key appears from a belt, bright for one moment in the firelight. The iron bands creak as the lid rises. Inside are wrapped items, spare fittings, perhaps better kept blades, cords, small bundles, and a pouch that the man handles carefully. You cannot see everything, and you do not try too hard. Curiosity is a lively trait, but in an armory it should wear a leash. The keeper counts or checks something under his breath, then closes the lid again. The key goes back where it belongs. Authority has made its little circuit. There is no full agreement among those who study castles about how sharply military and domestic spaces were separated in daily use, especially in smaller or evolving sites. A room might store weapons, host repairs, hold records, shelter servants, or, on a night like this, make space for a half-frozen traveller. Categories that look clear on a modern floor plan become softer when snow blocks roads and households improvise. Last night, the armory was a dormitory. This morning, it is equipment, duty, and inventory again. A second guard enters carrying a bundle of arrow shafts. He unwraps them carefully and lays them out on the bench. The fletching is checked for damp and damage. Feathers are smoothed with gentle fingers. It is unexpectedly delicate work for a cold morning among weapons. You think of the strange tenderness required to maintain tools of violence. A bent feather is corrected. A loose binding is tightened. The arrows turned, inspected, returned to order. Nothing about this looks heroic, which is probably why it is important. The castle outside is now louder. Through the door, you hear men clearing snow from the yard, shovels or boards scraping against packed white drifts. Someone laughs when a heap falls the wrong way. Someone else complains that the stable door is half blocked. A horse stamps in agreement, or possibly in criticism. The kitchen smell grows stronger: warm grain, smoke, onions, maybe ale heating or pottage stirred back to life. Morning duties do not wait for comfort. They create whatever comfort the day will have. You are given a task. Finally, though it is simple enough for a guest whose chief qualification is being awake. The woman points to a small stack of folded cloths and then to a peg. You carry them across the room and hang them where she indicates. There, you have contributed to medieval civilization. Try not to become arrogant. The cloths are rough under your hand. One is stained with oil, another smells sharply of vinegar. These are not decorative linens, but working rags, used to wipe, wrap, polish, dry, and protect. The armory needs them as much as it needs blades. Maintenance is an empire of small cloths. As you step back, the guard with the spear glances toward the shutter. Pale light leaks around its edges. He opens it briefly, and white brightness spills into the room. The yard beyond is buried. Snow piles against walls and roofs, softening everything into rounded silence. People move through it in dark shapes, cutting paths from one door to another. The air that enters is brutally clean after the smoky room. It bites your nose, clears your head, and immediately makes you appreciate the fire again. The shutter closes. The armory returns to amber and grey. You feel the night leaving your body by degrees, not the stiffness, unfortunately. That intends to stay for a while. But the dreamlike sense of being outside ordinary time begins to fade. The castle has rules again. Objects have places. People have duties. Food must be prepared. Animals must be fed. Snow must be cleared. Weapons must be checked. Fires must be kept. Records, perhaps, must be guarded. The day has opened its ledger. You fold your own cloak more tightly around you and stand ready to move when told. You are no longer a sleeper among shields. You are a temporary guest in a working household, and the household has turned its face toward the morning. Behind you, the hearth crackles brighter. Ahead, the yard waits under snow. Around you, the armory hums with cloth, iron, wood, breath, and Rank restored quietly into motion. The shutter's brief opening has changed the room. Even after it closes, the memory of that white brightness remains, sharp and clean against the fire smoke. You can feel the morning beyond the walls now. Not warm, not kind exactly, but present. The storm has passed, or at least withdrawn far enough to let the castle count itself. That is what comes after a winter night like this. Not celebration, first counting. You follow the others toward the door when the armory has no further patience for idle bodies. The guard lifts the latch, and the cold comes in at once, bright as a slap. You step into the passage, blinking, with your cloak close around your throat. The stone underfoot is damp where snow has been tracked in and stamped into grey slush. A servant has thrown down straw in the patches to keep people from slipping, which feels less like decoration and more like mercy with stems. The corridor leads toward the yard, and every few steps the castle shows some sign of the night's work. A puddle below a shutter, a heap of snow blown under a door, a little drift gathered on an inner sill, absurd and delicate, as if winter has signed its name indoors. A man with a broom pushes slush toward the threshold. Another carries a bucket of ash. Someone passes with a stack of wooden bowls, face set in that morning expression shared by workers across centuries awake, but not yet reconciled. When the outer door opens, the world is almost painfully pale. The yard you crossed last night as a blur of wind and lanterns has become a basin of snow. It lies deep against the walls, rounded over barrels, carts, chopping blocks, and the low roofs of sheds. Footpaths have already been cut from the kitchen to the hall, from the stables to the well, from the gatehouse to the main court. People move through these narrow trenches like dark threads in white cloth. Each step makes a crisp, compact sound. The air smells cleaner than anything inside, clean enough to make the smoke in your cloak suddenly obvious. Congratulations, you are now personally seasoned. After heavy snow, a castle household had to restore movement quickly. Gates needed clearing. Wells and water sources had to remain accessible. Animals needed feed. Roofs and shutters had to be checked, and paths between working buildings had to be opened before ordinary routines could resume. A fortress is only useful if people can actually move inside it. makes even authority shovel. You stand near the doorway, trying not to block anyone, and watch the morning labour unfold. 2 men are clearing the stable entrance, pushing snow aside with broad wooden shovels. One slips, catches himself, and mutters something that might be a prayer if judged generously. The horse inside stamps, impatient with the slow progress of human engineering. A boy carries hay in a bundle larger than his torso and vanishes behind the stable door like a walking nest. Near the well, a servant breaks ice from the edge of a bucket. The sound is sharp and glassy. Another person scatters ash or sand along a slick patch near the hall steps. The ash darkens the snow in ugly practical streaks. It is not picturesque, but it keeps ankles intact, which is a noble goal. Medieval beauty often has to step aside for not falling down. You glance toward this gatehouse. It looks different in daylight, less monstrous than it did when the portcullis hung over you in lantern shadow. Snow rests on its ledges and along the teeth of the raised ironwork. The guards there are moving slowly, clearing the entrance and checking the road beyond. The road itself has disappeared under drifts, beyond the gate. The fields are a white emptiness broken by hedges, dark trees, and the faint smoke of village roofs. That smoke matters. It means people survived the night, or at least fires have been coaxed back to life. Thin lines run from cottages beyond the castle's land. Soft grey against the pale ski somewhere out there. Doors are being pushed open against snow. Animals are being checked. Children are being told to stay away from the frozen ditch, which they will interpret as useful information for later. Women and men are clearing paths, breaking ice, shaking snow from thatch, counting losses. The castle's mourning is grander in stone, but not unique in effort. A curious winter trick appears near the gate. One guard uses a long pole to knock snow from a roof edge before it can fall on someone. He does it cautiously, then jumps back when a heavy sheet drops with a soft, satisfying thump. Everyone nearby looks at the heap for a moment, silently pleased that the roof chose obedience. This is the kind of drama winter provides when it is tired of trying to kill you directly. The night's damage is small but real. A shutter on one storage shed hangs crooked. Someone points at it, and another person groans because repair has just joined the morning list. A wattle fence near the animal yard has partly collapsed under the drift. One roof is leaking at the edge where snow has melted near a warm interior and refrozen below. Nothing catastrophic, enough to occupy cold hands. Researchers reconstructing castle life often have to balance architectural evidence with documents that record repairs, purchases, wages, and materials. A surviving wall tells one kind of story, an account entry for boards, nails, tiles, thatch, rope, or paid labour tells another. But many moments like this, the ordinary survey after a storm, vanish almost completely, unless damage became expensive enough to write down. The small curses, the wet sleeves, the decision to fix the shutter now rather than later. Those belong to lived history, more than written history. The air is so cold that your breath rises thickly. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and feel the rough wool against your knuckles. Your body is stiff from the floor, but the brightness wakes you. Snow makes the castle quieter and louder at once. It muffles distant sounds, while nearby noises become crisp shovel edge, boot crunch, horse snort, bucket clink, wooden door creak, clink, someone's laugh bursting briefly and then fading. The social order is visible even in the snow. Some direct, some obey, some carry tools, some carry keys, some stand watch. Yet weather has a sly way of levelling appearances. A senior servant may still command, but his boots are wet. A guard may hold authority at the gate, but snow has gathered on his hood. The Lord, wherever he is, will depend on these chilled people clearing paths before he can move through his own household with ease. Stone power wakes only because hands have already gone outside. You are guided towards the edge of the yard where the path is packed enough to walk. The woman from the armory passes carrying cloths to another building. She looks at the sky and makes a brief sound of judgment. You follow her gaze. The clouds are thinning in places, pale blue appearing like cold glass behind them. Sunlight has not yet warmed anything, but it touches the upper wall and makes the snow glitter. The castle, which felt last night like a dark fist against the storm, now looks almost gentle, softened at every harsh line. Do not be fooled. Of course gentle-looking castles are still castles. The walls still separate, the gate still controls. The armory still holds weapons, the records still bind obligations, the year is still unsettled. But morning after snow gives even hard places a brief innocence. Edges blur, footprints begin again, damage can be repaired, smoke rises, people laugh at roof snow. Someone finds the missing bucket half buried near the woodpile and announces it as though recovering a relic. You think back to the night's fear, how the storm had made every latch seem important, every murmur political, every shadow watchful. Now the same place is full of tasks. Fear has not vanished. It has been given a shovel, a broom, a bucket, a strap to mend, a horse to feed. That may be one of the old secrets of resilience. People do not always overcome anxiety by thinking grand thoughts. They clear a path to the stable. They warm broth. They tighten a hinge. They count what survived. The gate opens a little wider, and men look out at the buried road. No traveller will move easily today. Perhaps you will not leave as soon as planned. Weather willing, the guard said. Weather, apparently, has terms. You feel a small inward sigh, but not despair. There is fire in the armory, food somewhere in the kitchen, and work enough to make another day pass. You have had worse prospects in this century, or would have, if you belong to it. Snow falls once from a high ledge and bursts into powder near the wall. A boy cheers softly, then is told to get back to work. The pale sun lifts higher, and the whole yard brightens around you. The castle resumes itself after the storm damaged, smoky, hungry, hierarchical, practical, alive. You stand in the cold morning and breathe it in. The air hurts beautifully. Beyond the walls, village smoke climbs within them. Paths lengthen through snow. Last night the castle held you against the weather. Now it shows you the quieter strength that comes afterward. Not in resisting the storm, but in rising after it, counting the losses, and beginning again with numb fingers. The cold morning holds you for a while, bright and clean, before the armory calls you back inward. Not with a voice. Of course, rooms do not call unless you have spent too long sleeping near helmets and bitter herbs. But the pull is there all the same. The yard is beautiful. Yes, with snow piled high and pale sun touching the walls. It is also freezing, busy, and entirely too full of people carrying things with purpose. After one night in this castle, you have learned that the safest place for a temporary guest is usually wherever fewer people need to walk. So you return toward the low doorway, stepping carefully along the packed path. The snow crunches beneath your boots. Smoke rises from the kitchens. Somewhere. A horse shakes its mane and sends a fine spray of frost into the air. A servant laughs, then coughs, then laughs again. The sound follows you into the passage, where the light narrows and the castle becomes stone, shadow, and the smell of damp wool once more. The armory is warmer now than the corridor, though not warm enough to become arrogant. The fire has been fed properly, and flames climb with a steady crackle. Morning light leaks around the shutter edges, mixing with the amber glow from the hearth. The room that sheltered your sleep has fully returned to work straps laid out, cloths folded, a spear checked, a helmet set aside for Eve Corps, a bundle of arrows drying where smoke will not ruin them. Your corner by the wall is almost erased. The sacking has been taken up, the straw has been swept, the shield that guarded your shoulder without being asked is back in its ordinary position. You stand there for a moment, feeling the odd sadness of a temporary place disappearing. Last night, that patch of floor was your whole world. Hard, smoky, crowded, and not remotely designed for comfort, but yours in the way emergency shelters become yours. Now it is only part of the armory again. No one will mark that you slept there. No record will say that a cold traveller curled beside a chest during a blizzard in 1381 and learned to be grateful for a folded cloak. Most lives leave marks like warmth leaves stone, briefly, then gone. Castle armories were not always separate rooms in the tidy way modern visitors imagine. Arms and armour might be stored in towers, chambers, gatehouses, chests, or specialised spaces, depending on the size, wealth, and organisation of the household. The important thing was control keeping equipment dry, accessible to the right people, and protected from theft or misuse. You feel that control around you now, in the locked chest. The careful hands, the glance that tells the boy not to touch what he has no business touching. The armory is a practical room, but it is also trust made visible. The woman by the hearth sees you lingering and gives a small nod toward the fire, permitting you a final moment near it. You step closer. Heat meets your knees, then your hands. Your cloak smells so strongly of smoke that it may qualify as preserved food. Still, the warmth is lovely. You hold your palms out, watching the skin redden in the glow. On the bench nearby lies a little piece of polished bone or antler, used perhaps as a toggle, tool handle, or fitting. Someone picks it up, rubs it with a thumb, and sets it in a tray with other small parts. It reminds you how much of this room is made from lives transformed wool from sheep, leather from cattle or deer, horn for lanterns, feathers for arrows, bone for tools, wood from forests, iron from earth, human labour from everywhere. A castle looks like stone from the outside. Inside, it is a woven thing. There is no perfect agreement among researchers about how people of this period understood their castles in emotional terms. Were they proud of them, afraid of them, dependent on them, resentful of them, comforted by them? The answer changes with status. A lord might see inheritance and authority, a servant might see work and shelter. A villager might see protection in war, a court of obligations, or a symbol of demands that reached into every harvest. You, after one winter night, see all of these at once. The castle is not one meaning, it is a weathered container for many lives rubbing against one another. The fire snaps, and a spark leaps up the chimney. You follow it with your eyes until it disappears in the dark throat above. Last night, the chimney seemed moody and unreliable, coughing smoke into the room when the wind shoved downward. Now it draws cleanly enough, carrying the fire's breath away. The room feels clearer, or perhaps you are simply more awake. A guard enters, stamps snow from his boots, and accepts a cup from the woman. He drinks, wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, and looks toward the rack. The day will ask things of him soon. Perhaps road checks, perhaps gate duty, perhaps clearing more snow, perhaps listening for news, because even snowbound roads eventually open, and when they do, rumours will walk in again wearing wet boots. The revolt, the taxes, the frightened talk from last night, none of it has been solved by mourning. History does not resolve itself because a traveller would like a peaceful ending. Richard II remains young. The kingdom remains uneasy. Lords still expect rents and services. Workers still remember loss, scarcity, and anger. Officials still want obedience in villages. People still weigh what they owe against what they can bear. The storm has passed, but the year has not. And yet, this room insists on ordinary continuation. A strap is repaired, a blade is wiped, a boy is corrected for moving too slowly. A woman warms her hands before lifting another cloth. Someone asks whether the stable path is clear. Someone else says the west shutter needs fixing. The world's great tensions remain, but they must share the morning with buckles, broth, damp socks, and snow blocking the gate. That is perhaps the gentlest lesson this castle can offer before you leave the armory behind. History is not only made in uprisings, battles, laws, and royal meetings. It is also made in the quiet maintenance that allows people to reach the next day. A fire kept alive under ash, a horse fed before it panics, a cough soothed with bitter herbs, a latch checked in the dark, a stranger given a place on the floor because the weather has become too cruel to refuse. You step back from the hearth. The woman has already turned away, busy with the morning. No farewell speech arrives, which is good. Farewell speeches would feel suspicious in a place this practical. Instead, she gestures toward the door, toward whatever comes next. The road may be blocked, you may wait another day, you may help carry wood, or stay out of the way, or earn a bowl of something warm by being mildly useful and not touching the weapons. That is a perfectly respectable destiny. You look once more at the armory. Spears in their rack, shields along the wall, mail hanging heavy and dark, helmets patient on the bench, fire bright in the hearth, straw swept into order, smoke thinning near the beams. No romance has been removed from the castle by seeing it closely. If anything, the romance has changed shape. It is no longer shining armour and noble banners. It is endurance. It is shared warmth. It is the small human kindness hidden inside a hard world. Then you turn toward the passage, carrying the night with you in your smoky cloak, your stiff back, your warmed hands, and the memory of firelight on iron while the blizzard pressed its face against the stone. And now the scene grows softer. The armory begins to fade behind you, not disappearing all at once, but loosening gently, like a dream at the edge of the morning. The spears blur into tall shadows, the shields become round, quiet moons along the wall. The helmets close their hollow eyes and rest. The fire settles lower, no longer asking you to watch it, only offering its last warm colour to the room. Outside, the snow lies still over the yard. Footprints cross it now, careful and dark, but even they seem hushed beneath the pale winter sky. Smoke lifts from the kitchen roof in a slow grey ribbon. Somewhere below, a horse breathes softly into hay, somewhere near the gate. A guard leans on his spear and looks out over the buried road, waiting without hurry. You do not need to go anywhere now, not really. The cold has softened. The stone has grown distant. The hard floor has released you. All the sharp things of the night, the iron, the wind, the locked doors, the rumours of unrest, settle into quiet shapes behind you. They belong to history now, and history, for this moment, is kind enough to whisper instead of shout. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands grow warm. Let the last sparks rise into the chimney and vanish. The castle has held through the storm. The fire has lasted until morning. The people inside have woken, breathed, worked, and begun again, and you may rest. The snow covers the road. The hearth glows low. The armory sleeps after you. Sweet dreams.